Welcome to our seventh annual NUICfootball.com playoff show. I am your host, Kyle Kampmeyer, and joining me is Greg Armstrong from View from the West. And on the right here, I have our eight-man guru, Joe Murdian from A Spotlight on IFA in Illinois. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to cover eight-man through Class 3A. We're going to go through the projected brackets. We're going to talk about players and teams to watch. We're going to release the brackets. And then we're going to break down the potential matchups that we see on the road to state. With that, we're also going to give you guys our projections to each state championship game, and we're going to decide who we pick as our winners for that state championship game. Once we release these brackets and we start going through some of the breakdowns, there is the chat box. We do invite you and encourage you to ask any questions that you may have. That way we can interact with you guys as well. And we'll respond to any of the questions that you guys have. So we hope that you enjoy this presentation. With that, let's go ahead and get things kicked off in eight-man. And Joe, today we had a big game between Martinsville and St. Thomas More that went in the direction of St. Thomas More winning that game 20-14. Very close game. Martinsville had a 14-0 lead in that game at halftime.
Yes, they did. And it was still a 14-6 game in the fourth quarter, and St. Thomas More scored, tied the game up. Martinsville got the ball back there driving. They turned the ball over in downs 4th and 2, and then Peace Bumba breaks it for a 65-yard touchdown with a minute to go, and St. Thomas More holds on for the win, and they get the 1 seed in the eight-man bracket.
Yeah, we already knew that coming in, is that with the win, they would lock up the 1 seed because of playoff points. Last night, we had another big game between Amboy, number 1 ranked, against Polo, number 3 ranked. And you were actually at that game on call, and that game didn't really go to expectations in that one.
No, it did not. Amboy, they've been number 1 ranked team all season in eight-man football, and they showed again last night, once again, that they belong there until somebody can knock them off. They're a real solid team on both sides of the football, and going to be tough for somebody to knock them off once the playoffs get going here.
What's another team that you've been able to see that you're really interested in?
Well, obviously from this area, the Millersville Missiles, they're 8-1. Their only losses to the Amboy Clippers. It was a close game, 32-20. They got the quarterback Connor Nye, one of the best players in all eight-man football. But the other team I'm probably impressed with, and the team that I think maybe has a chance that could, win the whole thing, would be the Ridgewood Spartans, out of Cambridge. They're a real solid team, very well coached. Got a lot of guys back from last year's team. And they put 42 points on Amboy, and no one else has even come close to that.
Yeah, and, we're talking about games with Milledgeville, Polo.
Right.
And then you got Ridgewood doing that. And you were at the game where Ridgewood played Polo, and really that game should have went in favor of Ridgewood.
Yeah, that was a heartbreaker for Ridgewood that night. Polo was down 10 with a minute 10 to go. They get a touchdown, don't get the onside kick. Then Ridgewood, trying to run the clock out, fumbles the ball. Polo gets the ball back and scores, and they get Ridgewood there. They score 14 points in the last minute 10. So that was a big win for Polo that night, coming off that Milledgeville loss. But Ridgewood's still a very solid team, and a team that just very good line play, very good backs, a solid quarterback, and Riley Couture. And they're going to be a tough team to beat, especially the way this bracket's shaped out. They got to probably like their draw, I would think.
Yeah, I would say, you take a look at their running game with Roy Sandberg. Going into week 9, he had 682 yards and 11 touchdowns, is what I have last recorded from Coach Elder. And then, like you said, Riley Couture, and then you got Preston Moriarty. So they've really been standing out a lot in what they do. And you've talked about Ridgewood quite a bit on your podcast as well.
Yeah, and you just referenced Coach Elder. And I think what I like about them going into this playoff field is that, if any coach is going to, learn from what happened the first time, I think he's been around long enough to kind of see the X's and O's and see what needs to change next time to kind of get over that hump. So I like the draw, and I like the coach in the fact that I think he can scheme to kind of figure out what do we need to do just enough to get the win. So it'll be interesting to follow them for sure. Yep.
So taking a look at Martinsville, have you been able to see Martinsville play at all?
Just what I saw today. I caught a little bit of their game against St. Thomas More today.
Okay. Yeah, I have not been able to get a chance to see them. I know they got the Herrera kid.
Yep.
That's been
Yep.
pretty explosive for them. And obviously putting up a great game today. Their only other loss was the 60-6 beating that they took from Amboy. And, after seeing Amboy yesterday, man, they look every part of what we expected them to be from last year. But this year, they look even bigger than they did last year.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Kyle. They do look a lot bigger. Those kids are in the weight room. It starts with Brennan Blaine, defensive end and tight end. And then they just got a solid line. Trey Payne, Landon Monavon, Austin Heath. I mean, these guys are just all solid. And they've, in the big games against Ridgewood, against Polo, against Millersville, they have controlled the line of scrimmage. And that speaks volumes to what Amboy's got going on there. And it makes it a lot easier when you got, some of the best running backs too, Quinn Luffelman, Landon Walshall, just a very well-rounded team. And again, they have everybody back but one guy from that state championship loss last year against West Central. So it's not like you can say, well, Amboy's good, but they're not experienced. No, they're more experienced than anybody as well. So they got everything going for them heading into the 8-man playoffs here.
Another team that's been in our rankings most of the year and have really had a good comeback season based off of what they did last year, being that they were young and they returned a lot, is Flanagan Cornell Woodland. They're led by their leading rusher, Peyton Quatenance, who's ran for over 1,000 yards and 19 touchdowns going into week 9. And then Kessler Collins is there too, who's added another 783 yards and 10 touchdowns on the ground. Really interested to see how they fit into what we expect these playoffs to look like as well.
Right. When you take a look at Flanagan, just when you look at some of the scores, they played St. Thomas More as good as anybody. I think it was a 20-17 game. Now, granted, week 3, but still, that was a very good test for Flanagan there. Was that week 3, Kyle?
It was week 2.
Week 2. Okay.
MCP was week 3.
Yeah, that's correct.
But yeah, they had that back-to-back. You're right.
I thought they were going to maybe get St. Thomas More. Actually fallen that game a little bit that night. But so they played one of the top teams in 8-man very tough back in the beginning of the season. So, yeah, it's a very, very improved team from last year. They were very, very young last year, brought a lot of guys back. And, I'd be interested to see what they can do. And they got a good draw for the first round, I think, too, as well.
Yeah, I mean, Coach Reed's very excited with what he has there. And as he should be, because, like I said, a lot of young talent that they've been able to get into the weight room in the offseason, getting on key to doing the things that they need to do both offensively and defensively has set themselves up in a great position here. And then we can't leave out Milford Cisna Park, of course, when we're talking 8-man football.
Right.
I mean, they've been a large part of the
have.
playoffs
since
the inception of 8-man football in the state of Illinois. And Coach Schwartz has the Bearcats at 7-2 once again, led by running back Tyler Newcomb, who's ran for over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. And then you add the pass game where Caleb Couture has caught the ball for 686 yards going into week 9 with 19 touchdowns, and Gavin Shunk with over 1,200 yards passing and 24 touchdowns. So a very good mix of run and pass and a very explosive offense.
Yeah, for sure. Gavin's not very good running quarterback as well. But, yeah, again, just follow up on your point, Cloutier, the wide receiver, 19 receiving touchdowns. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I mean, that's I don't care who's on your schedule, what level you're playing, 19 receiving touchdowns through 8 games. That's pretty good. I will say, guys, that the Milford defense does concern me a little bit, just going by some of their scores. They have given up quite a few points this year. So that would be the one concern. Now, maybe they had some guys out and whatnot, but, as far as like you were saying, Kyle, they always seem to step it up in the playoffs.
Yeah, they always find that way to make the notch and get going in another direction.
Well, you talked about Martinsville and how impressive they were today and almost beating St. Thomas More. Go all the way back to week 1, and I know who knows what you really can take from week 1.
Right.
But they hung right with Martinsville. It was a 22-14 game.
Exactly.
So that's a long time ago, but it happened. It's on their schedule. So that's one that kind of stands out. But then obviously they played St. Thomas More in the middle of the season, and 54-20 result. So
right.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to gauge where they end up, but I do think it's 2 interesting scores to point out.
But on top of that, they did beat FCW 54-40.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And
Yeah, correct.
FCW played close with
Yeah.
the St. Thomas.
Yes,
Bowl.
exactly.
So I mean, when you take a look and you start balancing this stuff out, I mean, there's a reason why. I mean, we get blasted all the time for our state rankings, and it's like, well, if you take a look at these teams, you
Right.
can just tell by the body of work that they have here that they're a team that we got to keep an eye on and watch.
Well, and the other thing with Milford is I think Milford and Coach Swartz and his team, I think they got to love their draw sitting at that 4 seed, Kyle.
Oh yeah, you
mean,
can't go wrong with it, can you?
I think they got a pretty good draw, so they're a team that definitely we could still be talking about a few weeks from now for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the way that they're looking, they might have a tough opportunity because I had Martinsville in that 5 spot, so that
Right.
would be a potential quarterfinal matchup when everything gets put out there. But at the same token, they do have a good linear path to get back to a semifinal round again.
For sure.
All right, let's go into Class 1A here, and let's talk about.
Did we talk about Milledgeville? Did I miss that part?
Did we talk about?
I
Milledgeville?
mentioned them just for
Oh,
a second.
well, and we did forget about Polo. All right, let's go back.
Okay, I was gonna say I thought there were.
Can't forget about Polo.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to bring them up.
Can't forget about Polo. How do we forget about Polo? Outside of the bad loss last night, they did have a good win earlier in the year against Ridgewood,
Yes.
albeit that was one hellacious game there.
Yes,
I
it
remember listening to your call on the radio on that one. Very excited, as you should be, Dad.
Yeah. Thank you.
But the Marcos, I've said it before, and I've heard you guys mention it on the podcast as
Mhm.
well. Polo's just that team that keeps winning, and
Right.
it's kind of been their thing that they do. Even when they go about it quietly, they just sit there and they keep pounding out W after W after W. And obviously, last night was a huge wake up call to
Right.
everything that we had hyped up the game to be. I mean, when you go through common score comparisons, I felt that the game would be a little bit closer than what it was ended up being. But I did have Amboy favored in that one, as I'm sure most people around the state did.
Right. Yeah, Polo's a team that, it doesn't feel like it after the game last night, but still had a very good season, 7-2. And still, again, Kyle, as you said, this time of year, Marco coaching staff and the players, once the 8-man playoffs roll around, they seem to find a way to get things going. And of course, you got one of the top players in all 8-man the last 3 years still, Brock Salto. Plays some quarterback, plays some running back, plays some wide receiver. He's had 2 games this year for sure, maybe even 3, where he's had a passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown, and a receiving touchdown all in the same game.
I love it.
So, I mean, how do you get ready to defend that, if you're the opposing team?
Yeah, I mean, according to Coach Alston's stats, I mean, he's the leading receiver on the team.
He is.
Ahead of Noah Dewey, and Noah Dewey has really stood out a lot for the Marcos this year. And then, as you said, with Carter Murdian and then Brock at quarterback, switching time, you got Carter. I had Carter for 646 yards and 9 touchdowns on the season. And Salto is throwing up another 5 touchdown passes.
Right. So between the two of them, 14 touchdown passes. Actually, Brock threw another one last night to Dewey. So, yeah, Dewey, he's an all-state track guy. So, you get him on one side and then Salto on the other side. The defense really has to pick their poison there. So Marcos can be dangerous. Probably the one concern I have for Polo is their line is a little bit undersized, especially last night. They were missing Logan Nelson. They hope to have Logan back, had a knee injury that he sustained in practice this week. So hopefully he's back for the playoffs. He's 6'4", about 270. So if you could get him back in the line, that gives you a lot more size than what you had last night against Amboy. So hopefully Logan gets back. But and again, another play I want to mention for Polo, D'Lo Fernandez. Usually in the opponent's backfield, undersized but plays defensive line. A great kid and just does a real nice job at that fullback position and that defensive line position as well. So Marcos will be a tough out in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. And Coach Alston's done a great job building that program up, and great staff with all the guys there. And they're all bought in, and it's great to see. Milledgeville too, obviously another Player of the Year candidate in Connor Nye, and I see it, Kurt. We're getting there right now, buddy. Sorry. But yes, Connor Nye is definitely a player of the year type player.
Without a doubt.
Does everything for the Missiles on offense, but as far as commanding that offense, and then even on defense, he does a great job at the linebacker position. Can get through and cover some ground. Another guy that's really stood out to me has been the receiver combo of Connor Johnson and Carter Livingood as well.
Yeah, for sure. A couple of sophomores, and Niza really did a nice job hooking up with them. And that's the thing, Milledgeville, you're so worried about them running the ball the outside. They run, and then they'll hit you with that play action. And there's Carter Livingood 15 yards down the field with nobody inside. I mean, you've seen it game after game. It's like the Milledgeville coach just knowing, okay, this is when we need to do it right now, and it always seems to work. But I just want to say one more thing about Connor Nye. I mean, he would be one of the best. He is one of the best players in 8-man, but is there a player more important to their team in 8-man football than Connor Nye? I mean, Amboy, they're still a great team if you don't have Brennan Blaine. Pole's still a solid team without Brock Salto. Milledgeville, if you don't have Connor Nye, I mean, I'm saying, is there a more valuable player to their team than Connor Nye?
Peace Boomba.
Maybe Peace Boomba.
That was the other name that popped
Those
in my head,
would be the two.
Yep.
And I'm just not putting down Brennan Blaine or Brock Salto. But as far as most valuable to your team, Connor Nye is he is very important to the Milledgeville Missile team.
Well, we're seeing it with South Beloit too, with the absence of Fabian Myers too. Ever since he's gotten hurt, South Beloit's just kind of digressed, so to speak.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate, but they were able to get a important win last night too. But another kid that's really stepped out, in my opinion, for Milledgeville this year has been Micah Tom Smith.
For sure.
I mean, last year I thought he'd be a player that could definitely help out in the offense and didn't really get a lot of touches offensively. Right. Now, he did make a presence on defense, but this year offensively, he has really jumped into that offense. And there's been times, especially in that game against Polo, where I felt like that was one of the best games I've ever seen him play.
For sure. Micah Tom Smith had a great game that night against Polo. And, I see an 8-man game every week, and I would have Micah Tom Smith as maybe him and Riley Couture, the quarterback of Ridge, are maybe the two most improved players in 8-man from last year to this year. I mean, those guys, they were good last year, but they both really stepped their games up this year. But yeah, Micah Tom Smith is definitely a key player for that Missile football team.
Yeah, he had a breakaway run in the first half of that Orangeville game that I was at, and it was like you felt like Connor Nye was getting a lot of the attention in the early part of that game, and then all of a sudden handoff to Tom Smith, and he's gone. He beats you through, gets one block and beats you through the line, and he's gone. So yeah, player to watch for sure. And the way that Connor Nye is such a field general for them and just kind of takes ownership and is the kind of vocal presence on the field for them, I think that's a huge asset to have. That experience is invaluable.
Well, and he's the only quarterback essentially Milledgeville's had since they went to 8-man football. This is their third year.
Yeah,
he started his sophomore year. He's got a lot of starts under his belt heading into his senior year of the playoffs here. So Milledgeville definitely as big a threat as anybody to win this whole thing when we get things rolling here in the 8-man playoffs.
And we felt that they would be that way from the beginning of the year too. So you guys got any more on 8-man? Or?
I think we're good.
I think I'm good.
All right. Kurt, we're going to roll over to 1A now. Taking a look at some of the things in Class 1A, one of the teams that we keep hearing a lot about is Althoff Catholic. Althoff Catholic. Althoff Catholic. My gosh, can we hear more about Althoff Catholic?
I remember in the beginning of the season, Edgy Tim brought him up when I had him on our podcast, and it hasn't stopped since. I heard the name and I thought, okay, it's the name to follow, and yeah, we've been following. It's been
granted, the hype has been real. Yes.
Yep.
I've gotten a lot of pointers from people down in that Southwest St. Louis metro area, and they're like, some of them were thinking I was like scoffing at the fact that Althoff Catholic was there. It's like, I'm not scoffing at them. I think they're a legitimate opponent.
Right.
It's just funny because I have a feeling that a lot of people down in that area are just absolutely boggled by the fact that they can't understand why they're in Class 1A.
Right.
Obviously, when you take a look at some of these players that they have 3 juniors on the team, all receiving Division I offers at Power 5 schools. It starts with defensive tackle Jason Dowell, who has an offer by the boys in blue, and go blue, baby.
Product placement.
Yes. And I've heard stories where he can definitely take up half the field from his defensive tackle position. And then you add running back De'Aaron Hill, who is a transfer from Vashon. And then you have Charleston Colden, who just received an offer from Iowa State this past week. These guys are fast. I talked to some people from Durant and Pecatonica last night, and they said, fastest team we've seen all year. By the second half, we were gassed. And they're just so fast. They're so explosive. But at the same token, there's areas that you can see where Althoff Catholic can be beat. I've watched a little bit of their films, and they're big. I mean, let's face it, their offensive line averages like 270 pounds. I mean, they're big boys, and their defensive line is right around the same amount. And then you have the speed guys like De'Aaron and Charleston and a couple other guys that they have on their team. But here's the thing. You have those three guys. They're definitely important parts, but we're still talking about an Althoff team that struggled with the guys that they do have returning to make a 2A quarterfinal appearance. Now, taking a look at how things might be breaking down, they're definitely a team that we want to keep our eye on. I feel that they're definitely the favorite to get to Bloomington out of 1A South, and it's not even close in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think Camp Point Central is going to be in that mix. I mean, they're an undefeated team that was there last year in the state championship game. But, yeah, I mean, when you start looking at the things you just rattled off, like not many 1A teams are touting that kind of, prospects coming out. So it's just, it is what it is. The reality is, they're a very talented 1A school. And when they're in that southern bracket, there may not be anybody else that can get them. So, and their schedule is dictated. They have not played a 1A school all year, right? I'm guessing they've played everybody bigger. So
correct.
Everybody's been bigger. And one of the things that we have seen is that the favorite comes from the NUIC and Lena Winslow, and we have been able to get good barometers of Lena Winslow against Althoff because they have two common opponents in St. Teresa and Dupec. And you take a look at both those games and how they break down, and I think we're on a collision course for what a lot of people are already chattering about on social media about Lee Win Althoff for the 1A state championship game. But who knows? Injuries can happen, and when those happen, it can derail a team. We've seen it happen many times in years past. So it'll be interesting to see what Althoff does. There are some things of concern that have been brought up to my attention and areas that I see on their game film. They're a very explosive team, but sometimes they lack a little bit of discipline with that. And it's going to take a physical team that can play a disciplined style of offense and defense and really punch it down their mouth. That will be the team that may be able to knock them off. But time's going to tell on that. Like I said, very fun team to watch play for sure. Oh, Coach Big Pete. Homer. I'm not even from Lena, man. Love you, Coach. Another team to watch, CPC. You have they've been to the state championship twice now since 2018. Coach Brad Dixon, arguably one of the best coaches in small school football. He's doing a great job. Goes about business quietly. I like to call him Forston 2.0 because a lot of what he does kind of mimics exactly what we see out of Forston. Granted, he's got a few different wrinkles than what Forston has in there, but it's almost a carbon copy of what they do, and they execute it very well. What I do like about their offense is that they do give a good mix of run and pass. And the funny thing is like we were talking before we came live, is looking at their stats, how they just kind of mix things up like Forest.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what you said. Yeah, that's when you called it out. It was like, yeah, you're right. They are Forest 2.0. Like every week I'm impressed with, man, Forest ran like 7 different guys tonight. And then I just talked about they have, 5 different guys. What was the numbers? I think that I had gotten sent to me. Hold on, courtesy of Matt Schuckman. Let's look it up. Well, what did he say? That there's 5 Panthers have rushed for 250 or more yards with no one rushing more than Drew Pavin's 670. So they're very balanced. They got plenty of guys that they've worked into the system that are ready to take the ball. And I think, that's a good thing come playoff time. You keep guys fresh and fresh legs getting late in the second half. If you're talking about teams that are playing both ways, like a lot of 1A schools, most 1A schools do now, like that's big to have multiple guys that are ready to go that have that experience carrying the ball.
Well, the other thing with Camp Point Central, now I haven't seen a lot, but just looking at their scores, they had 3 shutouts, 3 different games where they held the opponent to 6, and then another game where they held the opponent to 8. So out of their 9 games, they've allowed double digits only twice.
And really,
so very impressive, obviously, on the defensive side of the ball, too, is Camp Point Central.
Yeah. And really, you take a look at like what I call their bad win, and that was the game against Calhoun.
Right.
I mean, I felt like they could have played. I mean, don't get me wrong. Calhoun, I think, is a team that we're going to be talking about for a couple of years coming up. Yeah, they're getting to be very good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even with the potential draw that they have in this playoff, that we're looking at a potential second-round matchup with those two again. And that was a 28-20 game, I think it was.
30-22.
30-22.
Yep.
So, 8-point game. And, I think that could be a definite good second-round matchup there. And I know down in the WIBC, they don't want that as a second-round matchup, but, it is what it is at this point. You can't really turn it back from that. So, but, Drew Pabin, Elijah Genenbacher, and Nick Moore are the 3 key guys that I've noticed that really get the ball rolling for CPC, and expect a lot of big things out of them. Another team that we talk about is Greenfield Northwestern out of the WIBC South. So them and Camp Point Central have not been able to play each other.
Yeah.
And I can't remember exactly what we're looking at as far as where they're going to be in the playoffs. On the bracket wise, I can't
potentially down. I mean, if they're a
2
2 or 3 seed, down near the bottom half of that bracket, I think.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be them or either Cesar Valier. They'll be down in the bottom half of that bracket. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, even they have what could be potentially a very good shot of making a quarterfinal run, even potentially a semifinal run.
Right.
And being that they're going to be the 2 or 3 seed, they're going to be in the same quadrant as Cesar Valier. So that'll be interesting, because I've been getting a lot of feedback on the old X about Cesar Valier this past week or two.
Yeah. When you look through, quick side question. When you look through the Western Illinois Valley, I mean, I know that we're talking Carrollton and we're talking, Camp Point Central. Do you think that there's the depth here? Are these teams getting challenged week in and week out? Is there a lot of quality here, or is it top heavy? It's some of those names that we know, and then it drops off.
It's definitely top heavy. I mean, you will take a look at some of their teams that are even making the playoffs.
Yeah.
Like, because they do a cross conference at the beginning and then at the end. So there's 4 cross divisional games, and some of these teams, they're lined up. They're playing the top heavy teams all the way through, and some are playing the gimme games.
Yeah.
And they're getting those 4 easy wins. So all they got to do is go in division play and pick up 1 or 2 wins, and they got a shot in the playoffs.
So like Greenfield Northwestern played what ends up being 3 6-win teams, but they didn't have any opponents that were 7-2 or obviously above that. So they made a pretty quality there, but nobody above 6-3. It's that Hardin Calhoun, the Winchester West Central, and then the Unity Pacers. I'm just always kind of curious when I look through that conference.
Right.
I never really know exactly some names I've heard of, but how quality is it as you go through the bottom of the list?
Yeah, and I mean, here in recent years, the WIBC North has been stronger than the South Division, and this year it's flipped over.
Okay.
The South is definitely a little bit stronger overall depth.
Yeah. Yep, for sure.
Some other teams to look out for in 1A South, Cumberland is a team that I look at. I know that they have a quarterback, Blake McMetchin, who's ran for 1,200 yards and 18 touchdowns. I don't know. We haven't really seen Cumberland make a lot of noise. And by the looks of my projection, I have them facing KC Westfield in the first round. And there's been a lot of talk about KC Westfield, coming out of the LIC, and their only losses to 3A Mount Carmel. And everybody's like, oh, well, blah, blah, and this and that. But it's like, I get it. Like, KC Westfield's good. Mount Carmel is good. But we've seen Mount Carmel in the state playoffs making deep runs for pretty much past decade or more.
Mhm.
We've seen Casey Westfield in the past there, but I mean, last year they were 4-5. They had a great rebound season, going 8-1. But I'm still kind of leery on how tough the conference truly is overall, because you take a look at the rest of that conference and it just doesn't look very deep.
Yeah. What other teams did you want to talk about down south? I know you referenced Cesar-Valier, potentially 2 seed on the bottom half. Their big win, I mean, their signature win was a comeback win over Johnson City, which ends up being an upset. They were down 22-6 late in the third. They come back, they win in overtime, stopping a 2-point conversion to win the game. And you kind of joked, they won their conference. They're getting a lot of people talking about them down there. But, I mean, they've won 2 first-round playoff games the past 2 years, but they haven't been able to get past the second round. So the track record isn't there. And I know this is not those past year's teams, but we know as well as anybody that you look through and it's, a lot of the same names that establish themselves and they're able to get these wins. So I think at some point you got to prove it to me. So I want to see.
Well, and that's what I was telling this one guy who was calling me a homer on Twitter here because of our state ranking.
You get the homer thing a lot.
I know. I do. Hey, when you win state titles, it kind of happens. Mm-hmm. But with that, though, taking a look back at Cesar-Valier, I told the guy, I'm like, you haven't even been to the quarterfinals since 1991. Like, how about you win some games and show us what you got before you start running your mouth somewhere? We'll see how that translates. But, Cesar-Valier, though, they are looking good. I did have them picked to lose again. Originally, like week 7, I had them picked to beat Johnson City. Then I had all the JC people coming at me. There's no way we're losing to Cesar-Valier. So I had to poke fun back at him this past week when Cesar-Valier beat him.
And that's a great win for Cesar-Valier. So that's part of that proving it to us, right? Like Johnston City is a team that year in and year out is getting 8-1, 9-0, 7-2. And, they are making a few playoff runs here or there. So, let's see where it goes from here for this, for this SVW, Cesar-Valier Waltonville. Don't forget Waltonville in there.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about Waltonville. Are they important?
Oh, Jesus. I got a little street cred because I've been to Cesar-Valier. I've covered a game there before. So
there you go.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, let's hop into the North. What do we got about the North? There's a lot to talk about there.
I think I said it on the Instant Reacts podcast last night, or I talked to WRMJ Radio this morning. And when you look at that 1A North bracket, somebody's got to prove to me that they can beat Lena Winslow. Because until someone does, that's where the conversation starts for me, right? Like that they're the team. They've been there 3 years in a row. They have a consistent track record of winning most, if not all, their regular season games, and then rolling through the 5 games in the playoffs. So it starts there for me. And this team looks the same script as the previous years, right? I mean, you've seen them, a little bit more, detail than I do, but it seems like this is a Coach Aaron-led Panthers team that's really good at running the ball and blocking and, getting on top of you in defense.
Well, and they are. I mean, that's one of the things with Lena Winslow. Obviously, on the line play, they're very well coached. They're one of their line coaches is Jared Gift. He doesn't take a lot of credit for what he does, but truly he's very valuable in what he provides for that coaching staff and how he gets these guys to play and explode off the line, staying low, finishing blocks, and that's important in football. And it's one of those true talents that we're starting to see kind of fall apart. And it's showing in the separation that we see. I mean, when we talk about being physical, I want to see the lineman that's firing off the ball and trying to pancake you every single time. Too many times we're seeing guys come off the line, they're doing the whole push for like 2 seconds and then releasing. It's like, you just gave that guy a tackle. I mean, how many times have we seen the guy that got blocked on the initial hole end up making the tackle somewhere? And if you would have stayed engaged and finished the block to the whistle, as coach speak goes, that could have been a touchdown run for all you know.
It's completely random. I watched the Quincy game last night. Quincy's a very good team and going to be in 7A. I watched a kid block a kid down to the ground for like 15 yards. I mean, just kept going. It was the play. It was hilarious. Like he was going, like you said, go to the whistle. He was going.
Yeah, I did that once. And I got called for holding. I went back and watched the film. There was no hold.
There was a lot of people from the other sideline were, doing this because I think they thought it was, but no, they didn't give it to them. they let it go. So anyway.
But yes, no, Lena Winslow is there. The only question mark that keeps coming up is what's going to happen when somebody shuts down their run game.
Yeah.
Because we have not seen them throw the ball. They've thrown it twice all season. Granted, they've been able to complete both those passes, but it's not really something we've seen. Now, granted, on the other side of it, they haven't really had to run the ball. I mean, they're throw the ball. They've been able to do everything through the run game, and obviously Gage Dunker has been a big part of that. He's ran for well over 1,600. He's over 1,600 yards now because he ran for another 200 some last night against Forest. And so I haven't got it all calculated up. But I mean, he's getting right up the career list, both at Lena Winslow in the NUIC. His total career rushing touchdowns is starting to push the record. And if I had to go back and look, I'm pretty certain he's already number 2 behind Sean Ormiston in NUIC history. So, I mean, he is doing things for the Panthers that not many before him have done. So it's awesome to watch and see for sure. Forston is the team that was on the losing side of that game. And, of course, when we talk about Lena Winslow, we talk about Forston, they kind of go hand in hand as those two have teamed up to win 8 of the last 9 state championships going back to 2013 in Class 1A. And, you know, we watched these two meet up in the semifinals last year, and it almost seems like every year that one of them's winning state, they had to go through the other to get there as well. Yeah. And one of the big question marks we've had on Forston all year is when's the real Forston going to show up?
Right.
Because they had a lot of returning players off of last year's semifinal team. And granted, when you take a look at overall record, they have improved. I mean, they're not 5-4. They played very tough with Dupec, but some of the games that they've won against what I call inferior competition, they should have laid the hammer to, and it just wasn't there. And then one of the things that we continue to hear is, well, they left 2 touchdowns on the field here. They left 2 touchdowns on the field there. And I've witnessed it. I've seen it happen. I've watched them do it against Fulton. I watched them do it against GCMS. And it's just coming down to execution and finishing drives.
Yeah. And, you know, I get that because we've kind of looked week in and week out and thought the same thing and had those conversations. But at the end of the day, you're getting wins, right? And so I think, like, Coach Janicki knows, you know, what to do, and the players kind of know how to execute when they need to hunker down and execute. So I think that is a quality that's going to be great to have come playoff time too. And obviously the track record is there, so you can trust a little bit of that. But yeah, there is some scores here that you kind of scratch your head and think, like, I thought this was going to be a little bigger. Yeah.
Right. Well, the other thing on the scores there, you look at that game last night of 36-8, but it was only 8-0 lean at halftime.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, Forston can do it. They did it for a half. They hung right with them. The game kind of got blown open at the end there, but yeah, kind of like what you were saying. They only beat Stockton 22-8. That's just an example. You know, that's a game you thought maybe they're going to win by a little bit more. You know, that type. They haven't put up a lot of points. Now, some of that's their style of play, but you know, so. Well, but again, if you're Forston, you know, you've found ways to beat Lean in the past when you weren't expected to. You know, so it'll be interesting.
To your point about their style of play real quick, like that's something that can play into their favor when they get into these matchups that with teams and programs that aren't as familiar with the NUIC, and this Forston team can control the ball. They're not going to turn it over very often, if ever, and they're going to play really physical, you know? So a lot of times you're going to see these matchups where the other team may have a great offense, but they're never going to get the ball. They're not going to get the ball enough to win the game.
Right,
so
exactly.
Who did they play? Was it Hope? Was it last year that Forston played Hope?
Oh, yeah, and buried them.
Yeah, and it's just that when you run into these teams where they're not expecting you to be that physical, they're not ready for that, the scores here don't indicate it because they're going up against the NUIC. But once they get out of that in the playoffs, you may see them really kind of flex their muscles. So it's something to watch.
Fulton is a team that we've seen. I ran into you down there a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
You didn't stay long. I don't know why.
I went to maybe the best game of the year, Morrison and Rock Ridge.
I'm kidding. I'm just joking. But, you know, one of the things that we've seen from Fulton, we knew coming in that they were going to be a younger team. They had some talent. We definitely knew they had talent, especially with Balin Damoff. And then you had the QB exchange and Dom Kramer. And I felt like Dom Kramer was definitely going to be the one guy that would be the question mark. knew he had a strong arm, knew he was athletic, but he hadn't really played the position. And then you have the transfer in A.J. Boardman from West Carroll, who did play quarterback. It's like, okay, who is Coach Lower going to go with quarterback? And he goes, we're going with Don Kramer. And rightfully so, it's worked out, and A.J. Boardman's definitely fit into that running back role along with Skylar Crooks and at times Jimmy Crimmins too. So, we're starting to see things begin to gel with the Steamers here. And taking a look at what I put out on projections earlier this afternoon, we're looking at a potential rematch with Morrison.
That's crazy.
First round matchup with Morrison, right?
Yeah. Well, there might be a few people at that game, huh?
Yeah, no kidding. Rivalry renewed before they even get back into the NUIC.
So. And it was kind of funny because I had people asking me earlier today, well, what about Morrison and Fulton? I'm like, I don't know. I said last I saw it could potentially be Aurora Christian. And then I start looking through it all. I'm like, yeah, I think it's going to be Morrison, guys.
Crazy. It's crazy.
So speaking of Morrison, you've seen the Mustangs play. Tell us a little bit about what you see out of Morrison. Obviously, they've been a big talk ever since they upset Princeton early in the season. And the Mustangs, we know, have a lot of team speed. And then, they had that disappointing loss to Rock Ridge and the show that you went to in the rain.
Yeah. Great game there. And that was the game that Morrison fell short. We'll talk about Rock Ridge in a little bit. But for Morrison, yes, it's all about the team speed. I mean, they got the speed they utilize on both sides of the ball with Brady Anderson and Chase Newman, Carson Strating, and then Deshaun McQueen as the wide receiver also plays on the defensive side of the ball. So they really have found a way to utilize that speed all over the field. I think what you saw in that Rock Ridge game is that Rock Ridge was really good defensively, maybe a little better up front against them, and that was a really tough defensive matchup. For a long time in that one, neither team could really get moving, and it was Morrison they weren't able to move the ball, but they were staying right in it, and they had one explosive play, a couple explosive plays, led to a touchdown. You thought, okay, this is going to be it. They're going to clamp down, and then they gave up 2 drives downfield to Rock Ridge. No, Rock Ridge is a 2A playoff team, but either way, it was, that was a kind of, I think a gut check moment for Morrison, and now I think they've rebounded fine. And I think they're a very tough team going into this 1A bracket just because of the speed and the mismatches they can create.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I have not seen Morrison, but what I've heard about the speed that they got on this team is just unbelievable for a Class A team. So, and again, I mean, you look at the two teams, that game against Princeton, they won. Like you said, the game against Rock Ridge. I mean, those are, even though they lost that Rock Ridge game, still a very impressive game, for them. But, yeah, if they do end up playing against Fulton, that should be a very interesting matchup. Fulton riding high after that win against Knoxville Week 8. So
yeah, that
would be if that matchup ends up happening, that would be just a fun game to see.
Awesome. Yeah.
Well, taking a look at a team, another team coming out of the track is Sterling Newman, and you have seen Newman play. And you take a look at their body of work; they're 7-2. They had a Week 3 loss to Princeton, 20-0. Then they lost to last weekend in Week 8 to Kewanee, 34-8. And we're talking about a couple teams here. Princeton is ranked number 3 in Class 3A, and Kewanee was either ranked low in 4A or receiving votes, but either way, they're right there in the mix of things. Yep. Kewanee projected to be in the 4A South this year, but tell us about Newman.
And also, Kyle, Week 1 they knocked off Rock Ridge, gave Rock Ridge their only loss of the season.
Well, and that's what put them on the table for me.
Exactly, for sure. Yeah. But Newman, a very, very good defensive team. I mean, this team relies on defense. Offensive side of the ball, though, they got a sophomore quarterback, Evan Bushman, has gotten better each week as the season's progressed. A couple good running backs, quick guys, Brady Grennan and Carter Rude. But the defensive side of the ball, this team lives on forcing turnovers. Yeah. I mean, every game you see Newman, they forced 2 fumbles and 2 interceptions or, something to that effect. I mean, they live on the defensive side of the football. Guys like Daniel Kelly, Caleb Donna up front, and then again, Grennan and Rude at defensive back. They're a very solid defensive team. Now, I don't know how their matchups are going to shake out, but as far as defense, a lot of these Class A teams are going to have a hard time scoring against the Comets.
Yeah. you look back at Sterling Newman's season, one of the more unique seasons you're going to see as far as, the wins and the losses that they had. They had a win over Rock Island. Now, only 3-16, but they're 6A. They're a solid 6A program. And just, I think, the other night beat Geneseo.
Yes.
In week 9.
Yes.
So it's like a very, a team that has gotten better in Rock Island throughout the year, and they were able to beat them at Rock Island. So that's one of those like impressive defensive efforts when you're talking about Rock Island doesn't have many guys playing both sides of the ball, maybe a couple of their top end athletes, but Newman held with them, with a lack of depth that they have.
Yeah. And when you talk about how unique their scores looked, after week 6, they're sitting 5-1, and there wasn't a game yet where they had scored more than 20 points, and they were 5-1. That's like 1970s, 1980s scores there. I mean, you just don't see that anymore.
Nope.
So again, a very solid defensive team are the Comets for sure.
Yeah. What else, Kyle?
Well, I don't know what else you got in 1A. Any other teams that sparked your interest in 1A North?
Stark County's undefeated, so the Rebels are kind of back on the map as far as this was a team we saw year in and year out for years. And they had a bit of a lull. They were missing the playoffs last year. They made the playoffs, lost in round 1. They're back now. I think I had gotten an email from head coach Jade Nord, and he talked about how he really likes the team because they're well balanced. They can do a little bit of everything depending on the game, depending on the situation. And a lot of it may not be pretty, may not be flashy, but they're getting the job done. They played solid defensively all year long. They were one of the only teams this year, maybe the only team this year, to really control Zeb Rashid from Anawan Wethersfield.
Right.
I was at that game, and they did a really good job of stopping him after. I mean, he'd get the handoff and take 2 steps, and they were meeting him at the line of scrimmage, or they were getting him to him right within a few steps. So really impressed with their effort there. Multiple guys flying to the ball. Luke Rewerts as a quarterback has really become a go-to type of guy for them. He can run the ball, really hard-nosed runner, but he can pass too. He can find multiple receivers. So that's a team that I like, depending on their draw, maybe them to win a game or 2.
Well, the other thing with Stark County, they are no stranger, Coach Jay Nord, to playing the NUIC.
Yeah,
He's played just about everybody in the NUIC in the last 20-some years. So they played the Lenas, they played the Forstons, the Milledgevilles, the Polos, they've played them all, So he has experience. He's not, him and his staff aren't going to be surprised when they're scouting the NUIC teams if they draw a team from the NUIC.
It's funny you mentioned that because last year when I went to the Lena Winslow Fulton game, he was there. I saw him walking the sidelines. So he was there kind of doing some advanced scouting, maybe you might say. So we already referenced Anawan Wethersfield. Zeb Rashid is a great back, just a really good workhorse athletic back for them. They have experience at the quarterback position in Dylan Ori as well. This is a team that, 1 point short to Stark County, like we talked about. They went for 2, didn't get it in that game with under 3 minutes left. But since then, they've really kind of gone off. They've really played really good football. A team they beat in that stretch, Rova Williamsfield. I also really like the experience that they bring back, depending on their matchup. One projection I saw somewhere was potentially them and Sterling Newman. That's a really fascinating matchup. Once we get the brackets officially, if that is the matchup, we'll talk more about it because that's kind of a contrast in styles that could be really interesting.
Well, the one that caught my eye for Anawan Wethersfield, week 7, they beat Farmington 33-15.
That was a big yes.
I mean, Farmington's only loss of the year. That one really caught my eye. Maybe not so much they won, but by the score.
No, I think that was one of those ones that I think that when you looked at it, Farmington was rolling along at that point, and ended up winning their side of the conference. So that's a big win. You're right. I got that one slipped my mind for sure. Yeah,
I've taken a look at Anawan Wethersfield, and I know that I was a little hesitant about the Lincoln Land Conference this year, just because they tend to, especially with the merger with the Prairie Land, and then we watched Fulton go down there and rip Knoxville a new one. Sorry, Blue Bullets fans, but had to throw that jab. That's for my guy, my Twitter hero.
So I will say,
but they look good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they've had, like we've referenced, they've had 2 pretty quality wins. When you look at the win over Rova Williamsfield and the win over Farmington, for sure. I will say, when you look at the entirety of the Lincoln Land Conference, it's a few teams on top, which we just talked about, and then there is a drop off. I don't know if you're seeing the consistent week in and week out. You're going to have some teams that aren't maybe quite up at that level on both sides, on the big school side and the small school side of that. So it'll be interesting to see kind of where these teams fit, how if they've been tested and how far they can go, and if they can prove themselves against the NUIC and some of the bigger schools or the better the top schools here.
Yeah, very interested. So, I mean, 1A North definitely has a lot to talk about. Going into Class 2A, let's transition over there because we only got about 10 more minutes and we still got to hit Class 3A. So,
all right,
let's go through 2A quick because I want to get to 3A so we can talk about that awesome 3A North loaded bracket that we have Dupec sitting in. Taking a look at Class 2A, obviously a lot of people are talking about Bloomington Central Catholic. There was a lot of conversation on them. Are they going to go 1A? Are they going to go 2A? And here we are, definitely with them most likely being in the 2A based off the projections I put out earlier today. I don't see where they have a shot to get into that 1A field. There was only limited action as far as setting that 256 team field today. And I'm very confident that we're going to see 6 teams with at-large bids with 4 and 5 records, which means that we're going to see Bloomington Central Catholic in Class 2A. Yep. But a lot of people have been talking about them and taking a look at what they like to do offensively. They run a spread no-huddle offense. They have a quarterback, Colin Hayes, that I've heard being referred to as the second coming of Cam Newton. He's very big, very fast, very physical type runner. And then you add to it their running back, Will Edelman, and a right tackle, and Dom McKibben, who I'm assuming that right tackle is who they're trying to get behind and run, kind of like Byron did a couple of years ago with Ellsbury. Defensively, they got a couple guys at linebacker, and Eli, I'm going to screw this up, but Rogucki and then Colin Hayes, their quarterback, doubles as a linebacker. So you know that if you got your quarterback playing defense at linebacker, he's got to be a physical specimen, right? Yeah. And then they got John Tay Powell at defensive tackle and Copper Stolfka at defensive end. So, we look at the Illini Prairie Conference, notoriously a 3A conference with some good teams that make deep playoff runs. Monticello won a state title over Byron here in 2018. Tolono Unity's been to the state title game 6 times, albeit runner-ups. St. Joe Ogden's been there 5 or 6 times. Again, still haven't won the big one, but they've been there. And then, we've seen Prairie Central at state one time or another in the last 20 years as well. And then Bloomington Central Catholic's been there in the past too. So a very good, solid conference here. But what we've seen out of it is, I was expecting, Tolono Unity to be one of those teams. I think in my opening state rankings to start the year, I had them ranked number 2.
Yeah. And
you take a look at how everything's broken down. It's kind of been this team beats this team, Team B beats Team C. But Bloomington Central's beating them all, and it kind of goes back to it reminds me of the NUIC back in the old days when it was Galena doing that stuff, where you'd have like 3 teams that would all compete with each other, but they couldn't knock off the top guy, and that's what Bloomington Central Catholic's doing right now.
Well, when I looked last year, I think Bloomington Central Catholic went in at 6-3 a year ago, and they were in the 2A field a year ago as well. And I think first round they met up with Mercer County. And I just thought that conference was so good that they had played, and they were a battle-tested 6-3 team. They just got by Mercer County. Mercer County hung with them till the very end. Bloomington Central Catholic gets by them. They played Rockridge in the next round, so I was following that game pretty close. And it was Rockridge that was able to come away with the win at Bloomington Central Catholic in that one. So a year ago, I really thought that Bloomington Central Catholic team, had a chance to make a run, and Rockridge was able to knock them off. This year, they come in at 9-0. I don't know if the conference is as strong as it was a year ago. Seemed like the conference was really good last year. Prairie Central, I believe, was an undefeated team. I want to say that it felt like Monticello Unity or St. Joe Ogden were all better teams overall.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's quite as strong of a conference this year, but either way, I just think that heading into this 2A field, I think this is a battle-tested team for the last couple of years, and they're obviously looking good. They're 9-0. So it's a team I'm looking at for sure.
Maroa Forsyth is a team that we talk about when we talk about state
2A.
playoffs
Yep.
and Class 2A. Yeah, I mean, they've been to what, 8? They've been there what, 8, 10 times? 10 times?
They won one or two.
They won two. They won in 06 and they won in 12, and then they've been there. I think they've been runner-up 6 other times.
Yeah.
So, and that's all since 2006, and obviously all under Coach Josh Joseph.
Yep.
So, Maroa Forsyth's been doing great. They've returned a lot of guys from last year. Big-time player in Cade Maurer, their quarterback. The offense runs through him. He's thrown for 1,960 yards. He's ran for 730 yards, has 37 total touchdowns on the season, just on offense.
Yeah.
You got a lineman and Andy Munjoy who helps out with Maroa Forsyth's line play there. And then a couple other guys that have definitely filled in and helped with the offense. Andre Harden has 546 yards and 10 touchdowns. And then in the passing game, you got Mitch Williams and Zane Giles, both close or right around that 600-yard receiving mark. They've combined for 13 touchdowns. So very explosive offense. We've seen them have a couple tight ones, most specifically with Williamsville. They had to battle back in that one. I think they were down 2 touchdowns, ended up coming back, winning that one 25-21. And then last night they had a good one with Athens where they pulled that one out 28-21. So definitely battle tested when we talk about the Sangamo. I mean, you're talking about teams Williamsville, Maroa Forsyth. Those two teams primarily have been to the state championship game in recent years. But then you have a team like Athens, and I ran into a couple coaches from Athens down in Decatur when Lena Winslow was playing St. Teresa. They wanted to come over to the game to watch Lena Winslow play, which was very cool to see because they're like, when do we ever get to see him play,
Yeah.
And, they're right there. They do great things year in and year out. They run a double wing offense. Coach Knox is awesome with everything that he does. And they just have not been able to break that mold, but it's got to be coming for the Warriors sometime soon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Another team that I've been told to look at is what was it? I think it was Westville. They have a quarterback who is a power type running quarterback in Drew Witkowski. I don't have any stats on him, but Westville, they're 8-1, I think, right now.
8-1. And are they potentially north bracket or south bracket?
So the funny thing about Westville is they kind of split.
Yeah.
Because of the location where they sit at, just northeast there of Champaign. And I haven't projected in the north bracket. Yeah. Of course, I have Maroa Forsyth projected in the north bracket too. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. But those are a couple teams that I was looking at that I feel can make some noise. You got a couple others in there that we've heard from. Johnston City's back in there, 8-1. I don't know if you have anything.
I do have some info on them. Yeah. So
they were a semifinalist last year though in Class 2A, lost to St. Teresa.
Yeah, so Johnston City, they finished second behind Cesar-Valier, which we talked about in the Black Diamond. So they lost that one to Cesar-Valier in week 8, but they bounced back with a road win over Carmi-White County, who ended up 7-2 on the year. So the loss to Cesar-Valier snapped a 31-game conference winning streak. So the Johnston City program has really been a mainstay in the Black Diamond Conference in recent years. And, clearly they've proven it. The thing is they, last year, best football season in school history. They advanced to the 2A semifinals. They lost to eventual state champ Decatur St. Teresa 39-15. So can they continue to ride that momentum is the question. Can they get back to that level again? That was kind of a high watermark for the program in their history. So I think they're looking at, can they get back there? And sometimes when you look at the loss to Cesar-Valier like that, like maybe that's the best thing to happen to you, right? Like that's that gut check to say any night somebody can get you, right? Like don't be overconfident. So see what they can do. But yeah, they're a good team in the southern half for sure.
All right, in Class 3A, we have Dupec there, and we've seen Cooper Hoffman this year. You were able to pick up a little bit of Dupec against Fulton, and you said it was like the first time you've actually been able to see him play.
So yeah, the whole time we've been doing this podcast, it's like, until Fulton joined, they weren't coming close enough to the Quad Cities area. So I wasn't able to, they're not going to go on Quad Cities TV, they're Rockford. So I wasn't able to see him in person. So finally, when they came to Fulton, I had a reason to get out there. I had to get out there, and so yeah, it was great. I wish I'd have seen him on a dry. It was a little wet, a little rainy, so I didn't get to see probably the full Hoffman experience, but I got to see Connor Hughes, who that was a name that kind of burst on the scene for me, and that was kind of not a surprise, but I think it was a name that we hadn't called out a lot early in the year, and he really came in, and looked well. So,
Yeah, I mean, Connor Hughes, I think, won Player of the Week that week for us. Ran for 88 yards and 4 touchdowns, so he definitely came onto the scene very big and did a lot of things there. Other teams that we've looked at, Williamsville is a team that a lot of people are talking about. They're 7-2, losses to Moreau, Forsyth, and Olympia, led by Braddock Cates, who's ran for 1,018 yards and 11 he's rushed for that. He's the quarterback, but Josh Cates is the running back, who's also he's the quarterback. I'm sorry. Josh Cates is the quarterback. He's thrown for 1,100 yards and 16 touchdowns. Braddock Cates is the running back, who's ran for 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns.
There you go.
And then you got Mason Lytaker, who's been on the receiving end for 428 yards and 7 touchdowns. So Williamsville is one of those teams that we talk about all the time because they tend to be in the mix of a deep playoff run year in and year out. And then Olympia coming out of the Sangamo too, with guys like Cade Lawler, Nick Olson, and Chase Litweiler. Olympia is one of those teams that I feel can definitely make some noise in that 3A South bracket.
I've liked Olympia all year, just kind of seeing the results week in and week out and kind of seeing where they fit in that conference. But you've talked a lot about Roxana. I was kind of high on Olympia, and then you started talking about Roxana down there too in that southern half of the bracket in 3A. So that's a team I'm kind of keeping my eye on. And if I pick them to go deep in the playoffs and they do it, I'll thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. You got to have a little shell action.
That's right. Yeah, really cool, unique uniforms and really cool, look for them. A couple of teams down in the southern half of the bracket, DuQuoin Indians, they're 9-0. They're a team from that southern half that's always in the mix. It's a name you hear this time of year. Southern Illinois, River to River, Mississippi division champs. Perfect regular season. First-year head coach Logan Spain. So they got a win last night over Murfreesboro, who was previously unbeaten. So a nice way to kind of
big win.
Yes, nice way to kind of launch themselves into the
39-7 win, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
so
it's
that's
not
true.
like
A statement win for sure.
Big win.
And we're talking about Murfreesboro and 4A, and there was a lot of talk about them being a potential challenger. I didn't see it, but a challenger to Rochester. Like I said, I don't see it, but
yeah,
no.
So what's interesting is the Indians pulled out 2 wins in the final minute of the game in their first 4 weeks, but then they've dominated ever since. So a couple games that they battled early, and now they've really, put on a show, done really well, including, like you said, that 39-7 win over Murfreesboro. I got to give a shout out to Darren Kennard. Is my guy. He's been covering sports down in Southern Illinois for a long time. I knew him when I was in college. He was a reporter for one of the local TV stations down there. So great guy hooking us up with information here.
All right. I don't want to skip out on Byron. We're going to come back because we definitely need to talk about Byron.
Yep.
But the 1A state rankings
1A
just got released.
All right.
Joe, you want to go ahead and talk it?
All right. Let's start at the top. Of course, the number 1 seed, Lena Winslow Panthers. They will take on Rockford Lutheran out of the Big Northern. And then the 8 seed Forston will host number 9 seed Ottawa Marquette. I'm sure Greg will have something to say about that in a minute. Moving down the bracket, 4 seed
upset
Kewanee Weathersfield hosting Deer Creek Mackinac, and then it's all set, guys. Number 5 seed Morrison hosting number 12 seed Fulton. So that is the top half of the 1A North bracket. Moving down the bracket, number 2 seed Stark County hosting number 15 seed Princeville. The number 7 seed Sterling Newman hosting number 10 seed Oneida Arova. Williamsfield, yes. Number 3 seed Chicago Hope Academy hosting Peru St. Bede, the number 14. And rounding out the bracket, Aurora Christian, the 6th seed, taking on the 11th seed Gibson City Melvin Sibley.
Ooh.
Some very interesting matchup. I don't even know where do you start, Kyle?
I don't, but I what I do see is exactly what everybody always complains about is Lena Winslow and Forrest in second round.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
or it'll be Marquette trying to pull a second upset.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Come on. We'll get into it. Man, Morrison Fulton, great matchup there. Stark County and Princeville, a rematch.
You
know, which is kind of always frustrating. And the matchup we previewed potentially was Newman versus Rover Williamsfield. Really fascinating.
Yes, it is.
Great defensive, play from Newman. But this Rover Williamsfield team, what I've liked about them is they're very experienced on offense. They got Riley Danner, an experienced quarterback who can throw the ball around the field, but they have 2 or 3 running backs that they can trust to run the ball. So they're a diverse offense. For a Class 1A school, they can do some things on offense. That head coach Grant Goldstrand really has a good thing going there. So I'm interested to see what they could do against a really good Newman defense. That's another matchup that I want to go see.
Yeah, those 2 style of plays there are very interesting for sure. That's going to be a great ball game.
Yeah. Could I get to Morrison and then go to Newman afterwards, or vice versa? I hope the athletic director spread them out just enough on that Saturday. Oh, that'd be great, wouldn't it? That'd be awesome.
All right, 1A South. The 1 seed goes to Camp Point Central, and they're going to play host to Red Hill, who is the 16 seed. The 8 and 9 matchup sees Calhoun at the 9 seed going on the road to Hayworth, the 8 seed. Belleville Althoff Catholic gets the 4 seed. They're going to play host to Tuscola. The 5 seed goes to Leroy, who will play host to Villa Grove. The 2 seed is going to go to Cesar Villiers Waltonville.
That's right.
As they play host to Carrollton. 7 seed is going to be Salt Fork, and they will play host to 10 seed West Central. Greenfield Northwestern is the 3 seed, as they will play host to Nokomis, and Casey Westfield is the 6 seed playing host to Toledo Cumberland. We'll come back and touch base on those matchups here because I believe the 2A bracket has just released as well. So let's go through that one. You got it pulled up?
Yeah.
You got it.
2A. You got it. 2A, yeah. So the number 1 seed in the north half of the bracket is Seneca. The Fighting Irish are 9-0. They will take on conference rival for them in Dwight and Garner South Wilmington Co-op at 16. You have number 8 seed Westville hosting number 9 seed Rock Ridge. So Rock Ridge loses their week 1 game to Newman, and they get sent on the road in the playoffs. That is a tough draw, not for necessarily the team you're playing, but just to be 8-1.
8-1 and go on the road. It's happened before, but it's rare. But
I had a coach from Westville earlier today arguing with me. He goes, "Do you think that's really going to happen?" I said, "Yeah, I think it will." I mean,
yeah.
Who's going to take a team like Maroa Forsyth, move them into the south just to bump Quincy Notre Dame up to the north?
So there we are. So the number 4 seed Downs Tri-Valley will take on the number 13 seed El Paso Gridley. You have Wilmington at the 5 seed playing Mercer County, the 12 seed. You have Maroa Forsyth, the number 2 seed. They will be hosting Chicago Christian. Moments is the 7 seed hosting number 10 Knoxville. Bloomington Central Catholic is the 3 seed. They will be hosting Mendon Unity Payson. Number 6 Farmington hosting number 11, Bismarck Henning, Rossville Elvin. And so that rounds out the north. We'll tell you got all the names in there.
Yeah, boy.
That rounds out the north. Do we want to stop there? Or do you want to?
Nope, we'll keep chugging along.
All right, let's go then. We'll go down to the southern half of the bracket. You have Arthur Lovington, Atwood Hammond, the number 1 seed. 16, Quincy Notre Dame gets in as a 4 and 5 team.
Last team into the playoffs.
I was just going to say, is that the only 4 and 5 seed that we'll talk about tonight between classes 1 through 3A?
All the others are up in the
okay. So there you go. So Quincy Notre Dame gets in. They did play a tough schedule. When you look through, we can talk about it in a minute. They played a tough schedule. 8 seed Nashville taking on or hosting Pena as the 9 seed. Athens will be the 4 seed. Hosting number 13, Piasa. Southwestern. Should have just went with Southwestern. I was better off. 5.
Don't worry, I used to do the same thing. I got corrected.
Okay.
One of my friends' wives went to Piasa.
See, that is a weird man. That's a weird. I've never heard that. All right, 5 is Red Bud. They host Chester, the number 12 seed. Shelbyville, the number 2 seed at 8-1. They will host Westglen. Lawrenceville, number 7 seed. Hosting Vandalia at number 10, Johnston City, the number 3, hosting 14 Auburn, Carmi White, the 6 seed at 7-2. They will host number 11 seed Breeze Mater Dei. So there's your look at Class 2A.
All right, and let's see. I think Class 3A just came out. Yep, it sure did.
All right,
So let's hit it. Number 1 seed goes to the Byron Tigers. Like I said, we're going to come back and talk about Byron. A lot of things to talk about there. They will play host to Hansberry out of the Chicago Public League at the 16 seed. The 8 seed is going to go to Chicago Crane as they play host to Peatone. The 4 seed will go to Chicago Noble Johnson. They will play host to Stillman Valley. The 5 seed goes to the Dupec Rivermen, and they will play host to former Aquin coach Brock Kundert's Oregon Hawks.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
The 2 seed is Princeton. They will play host to Paxton Buckley Loda. The 7 seed is North Boone, and they will play host to Monmouth Roseville at the 10 seed. The 3 seed goes to North Lawndale Charter. They will play host to Prairie Central out of the Illini Prairie we were just talking about, the 14 seed. The 6 seed, this is another team we're going to have to get into. Montini Catholic is the 6 seed. They will play host to Eureka.
Never heard of them.
Never. Down in the southern bracket, the 1 seed goes to DeCoin as they will play host to 16 seed Monticello. Williamsville gets the 8 seed, and they will play host to number 9 Tolono Unity. That's a matchup that already screams at me as we're talking about 2 teams that have perennial runs in the playoffs. The 4 seed goes to Mount Carmel. They will play host to Benton. The 5 seed goes to Sullivan Okaw Valley as they play host to Clinton. The 2 seed will go to Greenville. They will play host to 15 seed the Mules of Fairfield. Stanford Olympia gets the 7 seed. They will play host to Litchfield. Litchfield making the playoffs for the first time in a long time.
Okay.
Roxana, one of my shells.
That's right.
They're a 3 seed. They got Paris at the 14 seed. And then 6 seed is St. Joe Ogden playing host to Carlinville at the 11 seed. So some good, interesting matchups there that we'll talk about in a bit. But while we're releasing brackets, Joe, give us the 8-man bracket.
All right. So the 8-man playoffs, they shape up like this. We'll start at the top of the bracket. The number 1 seed at 9-0, Champaign St. Thomas More. They'll host the number 16 seed, Bushnell Prairie City. Number 8 seed, Kincaid South Fork, the Ponies. They will host number 9 seed, the Ridgewood Spartans. That should be a very interesting matchup. Number 4 seed, Milford Cissna Park. They will take on the number 13 seed, the Pawnee Indians. Number 5 seed, Martinsville, the Blue Streaks. Enrollment of 99. They'll take on the number 12 seed, the River Ridge Wildcats. Moving down to the bottom half of the bracket, the number 2 seed, the Amboy Clippers, 9-0. Taking on number 15 seeded Kirkland Hiawatha at 4-5. Number 7 seed Flanagan Woodland Cornell at 7-2. They'll take on the 10 seed the South Beloit Sobos. And then you got the number 3 seed the Millersville Missiles at 8-1. The only 8-1 team in 8-man football. They'll host the number 14 seed the Orangeville Broncos. And then rounding out the bracket, the 6 seeded Polo Marcos taking on the 11 seed West Prairie. So some very interesting possible quarterfinal matchups there. We'll dive into that here in a little bit.
All right. So like I said in our right when we were opening up, if you guys have any questions, the chat box is open. We got quite a few chats going on already. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask away. We'll sit here and answer those questions as they come in. In the meantime, we're going to continue breaking down what we see out of the projections. And let's go ahead and start in 3A since we didn't really get finished there. Let's talk about those Byron Tigers. We've seen them in the state championship 3 out of the last 4 years. They've won 1 title there in 2021. They were a semifinalist last year where they got pounded by IC Catholic, but they were a young team and they returned a lot of that talent this year, especially with like Kai Aikens, Caden Considine, Everett Wickman, and I know I'm missing a few other names, but the Tigers have definitely proven to be, in my opinion, the team to beat here in Class 3A.
Yeah, no doubt. I saw them week 8 against Dixon in that monsoon that was week 8, all that rain. But Byron Tigers, as you said, Caden Considine, only a sophomore, 6'2", 205, fullback, middle linebacker. He's in on about every play on defense. He's just all over the field. They got another great running back in the junior Braden Knoll as well. And then the quarterback, Aiden Shank, just a very good game manager, doesn't make mistakes. But the only thing that maybe if you were trying to find something with Byron that's a flaw, and I don't even know if this is a bad thing, but it's kind of like Alina Winslow in a sense. They haven't had a close game yet this year. So at some point, you're going to have to throw the ball possibly, but they haven't had a close game. Pretty much every game's been a running clock, So the Byron Tigers, you hear about how good they are, and then we actually go see them in person. You're like, wow, this team is really good. I mean, you just, I don't know what else to say about them. They're just so well balanced, very deep team, both sides of the ball, and a team that's not going to beat themselves.
No, I don't see there's any way that there's an upset before the quarterfinals. I mean,
no.
The first 2 rounds, I mean, obviously, as a 1 seed, you expect to get a pretty favorable bracket, but this one in particular is very, it's very nice.
I mean,
for them.
yeah.
Well, when you're, I'm sorry to say this, but I know other people out here are going to agree with me. When you're pulling teams from the CPL, you can throw your JV out there and come away with a win.
Yeah. Chicago, who is it? Noble
Hansberry.
Did they play today? Was that
Yeah,
were they one of the
yeah.
last games to play today? I thought I heard Sue's talking.
I don't
about
know
that.
if they have any idea what's about to happen. Maybe they do. I don't know.
Well,
But
let's hope they arrive to Byron on time first.
that is true. But yeah, I think the bracket, even the top half of that bracket, sets up pretty well for the Byron Tigers from what I saw when I've seen them play.
On the other side of things, I will say it sets up pretty nice for Dupek. If you're Dupek, you gotta like this draw, I would think.
Oh, definitely. I mean, granted, you're in the same quadrant with Byron,
Yeah.
but if you're trying to change your program around, and this is what I said to other people before, they're like, oh, Dupek has no shot. Dupek has no shot. I'm like, I don't know. If Dupek gets the right draw, which everything record-wise shows that they are, and we take a look at 3A, and while 3A North is deep, there's a lot of things that don't really jump off the paper as, oh my gosh, Dupek can't come. I mean, yes, there's a couple teams that are going to be overwhelming for Dupek, but at the same time, there's a couple teams in here that I feel Dupek can definitely handle their own on. Now, Oregon coming out of the Big Northern is going to be one of those teams. It's going to be a good test.
I think that's going to be a little bit closer game than what people think.
Yeah,
I really
agree.
do.
Yeah,
Oregon, a good solid team, as you said. Brock Kundert, former Akron coach, former NUIC guy, also has a lot of great assistants on that staff as well.
Yeah, and he's
John
familiar.
Bolte. I mean, he's got a lot of great assistants. So, Oregon is going to be prepared for this game, but they got a nice running back in the junior Logan Weems. The quarterback's also junior Jack Washburn. He's gotten better as the seasons went on. They got a kid, Josh Crandall. I believe he's maybe getting some looks from some very small schools. 6'5", 245, quick tight end, defensive end. Very nice player as well. And they got some good size on him. But Oregon's another team. They just have a lot of speed, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And Oregon may be a year away yet. A lot of juniors that play for them, but they're going to give Dupek, I feel, all they can handle in this one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you take a look here. I was talking to Brock Kundert earlier this year, and I'm pretty sure they scrimmaged with each other when we had the open scrimmages back in preseason too. And let's be honest, Brock has some similarities and familiarities with Dupek. I mean, they did play each other in the COVID year, so
yeah.
And there hasn't been a whole lot of change in what Dupek has done from then to now, with the exception of instead of Hunter Hoffman at quarterback, you got Cooper Hoffman at quarterback, who is more explosive than what Hunter was when you talk about a quarterback in the run game. Yep. As far as throwing the ball down the field, I mean, Cooper can sling it just like Hunter could too. And to be quite honest, his stats so far through the first 2 seasons of play, to me, jump off the paper more than what Hunter's did, which is why I keep telling people, watch out for Cooper Hoffman. He's definitely a guy that if Dupek can get on a run and he can get some more numbers under his belt, that's only going to lift his chances to become more premier going into his senior year as well.
Another interesting side note there. I mean, this really doesn't affect the game, but I'm going to throw it out there. So Pecatonic and Oregon would be in the same junior high conference. So those kids, would know each other from playing basketball, running track against each other in junior high. So even though they don't play in the same conference in high school football, those kids would all kind of know each other. That always adds a little extra to the games when the kids know each other.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Could we look down the other half of that northern bracket, we haven't really talked about Princeton yet.
Go for it. Let's do it.
As you say,
We
Princeton.
you can't leave
how have we
Princeton
not
out.
talked about Princeton yet, Greg?
Yeah. We get yelled at by my people. No, so I really like what head coach Ryan Pearson has done there at Princeton. I mean, I think I say it a lot, but I think it's important to note that, 10, 15 years, 20 years ago, Princeton was irrelevant. I mean, They had a couple years here or there where they'd pop up and they'd make the playoffs, but they were not doing this. This was not a consistent program, and it certainly wasn't a dominating type program like it is now. So I really like what head coach Ryan Pearson has built there. And, the sign of a great program is, you kind of go through these like generations of players, right? You had Rondé Worrells, and he was the guy. He graduated. Then you had Tegan Davis, and he was the guy. And now you have him graduate, and now you have names like Ace Christensen, Casey Etheridge, Noah Laporte as a wide receiver.
Very nice player.
Yeah. So just they have some pieces there now. And the dangerous thing is most of those guys are sophomores and juniors. So they're going to be around again next year too, which is dangerous when you hear that in the Three Rivers Conference. But I really like what they do. They're strong up front, really good line play, and they have the skill positions that, can back them up. They slip up in week 2. We talked about a little bit. Morrison had a crazy drive at the end of the game. They come away with a field goal to win it. Other than that, this team has, not let up. They've looked really well. They had a big convincing win over Kewanee, gave Kewanee their only loss of the year. So I think when you look at this team, they've been kind of knocking on the door in 3A North.
Right.
Can they break through? This is a pretty good draw overall.
I would say you love their draw to at least get to the quarterfinals for sure.
Yep.
Great draw.
Yep. And then, you got to match up against Lombard Montini. I followed them a little bit this year, but is this Montini team like at the same level that like IC Catholic was in that 3A bracket? Do you think?
Yeah, see, I'm not sure on that. What do you think, Kyle?
It's hard to tell. I mean, we haven't seen Montini in the playoffs for a couple of years. It's part of the reason why they're there.
Yeah.
Coming out of the Chicago Catholic League, they're clearly playing higher level competition. And of course, this is gonna piss off the smaller school folks. Me personally, I don't care. Play who you got. But you're gonna hear it. Montini has no business being in Class 3A.
It frustrates me too.
Yeah,
but
I'm in that crowd, Kyle. But I mean, I'm more of an 8-man or 1A guy, so that's fine.
But and don't get me wrong, I'm sure Coach Boyer and those guys don't really care to see a team that's been in 5A, 6A either. But it's what it is. I mean, how many times have we seen we've seen Rockford Lutheran, who used to be in the 4A playoffs, they're now in 1A. Aurora Christian was in 3A and 4A. Yep. They're now in 1A. I mean, unfortunately, you see it.
Right.
And we watched Marian Catholic come last year to play Lena Winslow, and we watched what happened there. And then all of a sudden, everybody was like ranked in Marian Central Catholic at the start of the year. Where are they at right now?
Right. Right.
They were one of the last teams left out because they went 4-5 in what I feel wasn't a very tough conference. I mean, you're talking about a conference with Aurora Christian and Chicago Hope, teams that we've seen on a regular here in Class 1A, and they're laughable games. I mean, there hasn't been a game yet where Aurora Christian or Hope have held their weight in water against an NUIC team. Right. So, and same with Marian Central Catholic last year. I mean, hell, it was 52-0 at halftime or something like that.
Well, what an interesting matchup that could be, though, in the quarterfinals, guys. Though Princeton taking on Lombard Montini. That's just very intriguing.
I know. Yeah.
You know, with Byron still waiting for the winner, possibly, of that one. But, if things shake out. But there's, a lot of football to be played before we get to that.
So
but
I want to say in the last 3 or 4 years, Princeton has lost to Byron or IC Catholic. I think they lost to IC Catholic twice, and they lost to Byron once, and the Byron game was 10-7.
I would say it was 7-3 or 10. It was just
very
low
7-3, maybe 7-3.
Yeah, 7-3 was.
Yeah, I think it was 7-3.
So, like I said, I'm not exaggerating. They've been knocking on the door. They've been right there. They lost to IC Catholic in overtime a year ago. Like, they're right on the verge of knocking off one of these teams that we'd consider like the big boys, the heavy hitters in here.
They gave IC Catholic their best game.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It wasn't even close.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Again, 1 through 32 would be nice, right?
But
and then Princeton would be.
Yeah, I know it would be. But to answer your question, do I think Montini is a formidable opponent? Absolutely. I mean, they carry like 100.
Yeah.
They had like 112 kids on their total.
Oh, I'm
roster.
sure of that. I just meant like, we thought IC Catholic was like elite level based on what we had seen in previous years. This Montini team hasn't been in the last couple of years. So they have the long-term pedigree, but not recently. Recently they have struggled. So that struggled relatively considering, they didn't make the playoffs. They still played a tough schedule every year. So
data analytics say they're one of the top 5 teams.
Yep. I believe it.
And,
Yeah, exactly.
And I take a look at those on a regular basis, and I feel that Montini is definitely a team that we need to keep our eye on because I expect the semifinals to be Byron versus Montini.
Yeah. And I think
I don't know how you argue that. I mean,
Ryan,
no disrespect to Princeton.
Ryan just said that Montini accepts your challenge. So
I mean, I want to see what Princeton can do in that game. But yeah, I think based on conference pedigree, I think Montini probably has the edge in it. Man, I want to see what Princeton can do in that game. And maybe I'm a little biased because I see Princeton a lot. We cover them a lot. I like them. But I want to see what they can do. You said that's the semifinal. In my opinion, that game is going to be the state championship game. That semifinal game. I'll cut to the chase here and just say it. I don't see anyone from that southern half of the bracket.
No?
I know you like Roxana, but
you got DeCoin still.
Maybe.
I hear a lot of noise on. I mean, okay,
I'm still picking Byron.
No, I'm gonna level here. DeCoin's there, but I've heard a lot of talk that DeCoin, while they're undefeated, the conference just isn't up to par with some of these other schools.
Yeah.
And to be quite honest, when you go through and you compare scores and you try to find common opponents, things like that, they don't match up.
Yeah.
And at least with the top 8 schools.
Right.
You go 9 and lower, you can definitely see that. Can they do it? I think Olympia in the second round, provided both teams should win those first round games, I think Olympia, that to me would be one of those games where you see a 7-2 upset a 9-0, because I personally would have Olympia favored over DeCoin in that game.
Okay.
But going back to Roxana, out of that 3A South, Roxana can run the ball. They can throw the ball and they can pass the ball. They got some big dudes. They have a quarterback that can sling it. They got some fast guys too. So you get those blends in there and you kind of do different things offensively. You throw other teams off guard. And when you do that, you can create a lot of havoc. And we've all seen that when you can get a little bit of space with some big guys making that hole available, and you got some speedsters that can slash through the hole as quick as the Dickens and get to the sideline and uphill, it creates a lot of problems for a lot of teams. And even though this is 3A football and you expect it to be different, we've seen over the past few years, there's not a whole lot of difference from 1A to 3A in the grand scheme of things. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's a couple teams in those upper levels that you definitely don't want to see them drop into the lower classes. But for the grand scheme of it, the whole picture, you could sit there and say, yeah, I'm going to take that team over that team.
Right.
And I've been saying it for a few years, and I'll own up to it. I mean, I could take a lot of teams from 1A and 2A and throw them in 3A South, and I'd be saying that's my favorite. And it's just
I can't argue that.
It's just the way that it's played out and proven itself.
Right.
Now, granted, you do have the teams like the Monticellos and the Williamsvilles that do come out of that 3A South, but they're legitimate contenders that we've already talked about. They play in tough-ass conferences that we see those prolonged playoff runs come from. So,
one team in the southern half of the bracket we haven't mentioned yet, Mount Carmel, the Golden Aces. They're 8-1. They're the Little Illini Conference champs. They had a really good year last year too, right? I believe
so.
They lost in the second round, but yes.
Okay.
They lost to Tolono Unity. That's 35-14.
Okay, we talked about that earlier. Yep. So they are riding an 8-game winning streak. They lost their first week to Gibson Southern, who's a powerhouse team in Indiana, apparently.
Yep.
Aces have dual threat quarterback Blaine Sisson, also plays on defense for them. He's going to my alma mater, going to Southern Illinois in the future. So goes to Lukey's. So here it is. Yeah, Aces have been eliminated from the playoffs by Tolono Unity the past 2 years. So in 2021, it was the semifinals. Last year was the second round. So they've been in the mix. Interesting to note there that, they have a Division I athlete in the mix, and, they've only lost that one game in week 1 to a non-out-of-state opponent. So
I like seeing small school kids go D1.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
And go to Southern Illinois, even better.
Hey, I'll cheer on the Salukis.
Yeah.
My school closed, so I don't have a school.
Oh, it's rough. Yeah.
Michigan, that's my school.
There you go.
I'm
So-
a Michigan man.
Yeah, I mean,
But
when
that
you
other-
look at Monticello, Tolono Unity, Stanford Olympia, St. Joe Ogden, like some of those names are good, but I think somewhere along the way they're going to run into a roadblock.
Right. I think there'll be a lot of good games in that southern part of the bracket.
Yeah.
But whoever comes out,
Yeah.
I don't see them
That's the best
getting
way
the
to
job
put it.
done in
Yeah,
Bloomington
that's
the
the
day after
best way to put it.
Thanksgiving. There are going to be a lot of great games, first, second, third weekend. But
Yep.
I just don't see whoever comes out of that being able to compete with a Byron or a Montini.
I want to see how my shells do. I'm jumping on the
You're
Roxanna.
yeah, you're
I'm
high
jumping
enough.
on the Roxanna bandwagon, man. I want to see how Roxanna does. I'm very intrigued. They got my interest peaked. So, Class 2A, what do we see there?
2A.
Well,
Go
I still can't get over Rock Ridge at 8-1 being a
Yeah.
9 seed on the road.
Yeah.
For if you're Westville, that's just such a tough draw, And I don't know how these two teams are going to match up, but just a tough draw. And then you look at all the 9-0 teams. Seneca, Downs, Tri-Valley, they're there year in and year out.
They were just there last year.
So and we already talked about Bloomington Central Catholic, Monroe Forsyth. There are going to be some great games in this northern half of the bracket for sure.
Mitch wanted to make sure we point out that the distance between Rock Ridge and Westville is 1 mile shorter than it is for Westville to go to Cincinnati, Ohio.
Wow.
Put that in perspective. There's some math for you. There's some geography.
But
hey,
1 through 32 shells.
yeah,
We can't
1
do
through
that.
1 through 16. We want to eliminate travel, right? So there you go. Westville might as well head to Cincinnati and play a game then in that case. But no, I think that's tough draw just for the logistics of having to go that far away on the road when you're 8-1. When I look at this 2A North bracket, I see number 1 Seneca, and I know they're 9-0, but they're going to have to prove it to me. Like their conference, I don't think is as strong as some of these other schools, and on top of that, they've had 2 forfeit wins. So really, like the body of work is not quite there, not through any fault of their own, but 7 wins instead of actually having 9 full wins. So they're going to need to prove it to me as the top seed there.
Well,
now they were in 3A last year, though, right? Seneca.
I think they were.
So
That
they
sounds
dropped down, so
Mhm.
they can't be upset about that. That's a bonus right there. I don't know how many guys they brought back, but
Yeah.
I know their quarterback's a stud. My buddy Matt Surdich has ranked Seneca number 1 all season long. He's been high on their bandwagon
Okay.
all year long, and I know their quarterback stud. They're big up front, so they like to power the ball. And you know how I feel about power football in the month of November.
Yep.
yes, we do.
Power football wins state titles, but at the same token, playing in that newly formed conference, it just doesn't hit home for me.
Well, they struggled. They had a close game against Marquette for the first half of the game. And Marquette has finished 7-2. They're in the 1A playoffs.
Right.
I don't think this is the best Marquette team we've seen over the last few years.
Right.
So in general, no offense to my alma mater, I thought Seneca would. I wanted to see since Seneca's going to win that game. I thought it'd be by more, and it wasn't as big of a proving game. Now that being said, they did beat St. Bede 70. They put up like 70 some points,
Right.
79 points or something
79 to
ridiculous.
35.
So they made a statement there,
Right.
Against the playoff team
Yeah.
in week 9. But
Well, another staple in 2A is the number 5 seed Wilmington. They're always a team that's a player in the 2A. So that's a team we haven't talked about yet, but you're never counting out Wilmington in the 2A playoffs.
Well, and so that puts some validation in Seneca because Wilmington's only loss
that's
was
true.
to Seneca.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I knew that, and I just overall, yeah.
Which, to be honest, though, for me, that kind of turned me off from both of them.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
But when we're talking about Coach Rinks and Wilmington, the Wildcats, like you said, they're
They're
there. They've been
every
there.
year in 2A.
Mhm.
Every year.
They've been there. They were the 3A state champs in 2014 over Williamsville. They were the 2A state champs in 2019. And like you said, they're constantly in the playoffs. I think I saw it was like their 27th consecutive year in the playoffs.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah, a possible second round matchup with Downs Tri-Valley. That would be one heck of a ball game there.
So their matchup against Mercer County is interesting. We cover Mercer County
Right.
coming out of the Lincoln land, and Mercer County's been a tough team to read. They've had some real head scratcher games where you thought that they were gonna, that they were gonna win, and then they didn't. But they've had some nice wins along the way as well. We expected more out of the lineup they have. So it's a roster that had a lot of returning players. Colby Cox has played well. I think he's been banged up throughout the year. They've had a lot of injuries to battle through. First-year head coach in Tanner Matlick. I think they're kind of finding their stride right now, but this is a tough matchup for them. This is a tough first-round opponent for sure. Another team that has kind of hit the skids, Knoxville, had a really great start to the season, and now I think they lost their last two, right?
Yeah.
They lost to Farmington and lost to Fulton. So that's an interesting one to see if they can bounce back. They're going on the road to Momence. I'm not sure. That's probably a little bit of a road trip for them.
I was just going to say, that's pretty much from one side of the state to the other, isn't it?
Probably a haul, yeah. But Bloomington Central Catholic sitting right there at that 3 seed.
Obviously, Forsyth sitting there at the 2. I mean,
yeah,
it's shaping up for some really, really good second-round matchups if the top seeds would hold the form there in that first round.
Yeah,
for sure.
I would love to see Bloomington Central Catholic match up against Farmington in the second round.
Yep.
That'd be a fun one. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I did. Downs Tri-Valley's 9-0. They're a team we always talk about every year. I think they could get through there. I think they could make a little run.
They could.
Yeah, depending on how the games play out. But yeah, I don't know. And I should talk about Rockridge. I mean, we talked about having a tough draw there, but they're a good defensive team. And, I think their offense is coming around when it needs to. They have a freshman quarterback, and then their running back, Alex Zarlatanis, has been kind of a workhorse, a mainstay for them the last couple of years. He's played really well when they need him to. But I think ultimately their calling card is their defense. They played really well defensively.
Yes.
They're literally a last-second play against Newman away from being undefeated.
Right.
Which, man, they really wish they could have now because they would be at home and not on the road.
Right.
Going to Westville. But that's a team I'm keeping my eye on because they, when they were down late in that game, they had 2 drives, marched downfield, like I said, with the freshman quarterback and Zarlatanis, marched downfield, scored twice on Morrison to win that game. On the road at Morrison when Morrison was undefeated.
Late in the game.
Yes.
Yep.
So I think that was kind of one of those gut check playoff type of atmospheres, and they came through. They delivered. So that's a team that I look at when again, I say that Seneca's got to prove it to me. If Rockridge gets in the second round here.
Seneca at Rockridge.
I love it. I know. That's another great matchup that I think that would be an opportunity, certainly for Seneca to prove it. They've also, they've beaten Wilmington. So they did it in week 1, but that's a matchup I want to see as well.
You talk about Farmington and Bismarck
a little bit. I didn't talk about Bismarck, Henning, Rossville, Alva.
So I mean, they've had a few hiccups here, and taking a look at what they have Aiden Ingram and Chaz Dubois, wide receiver, quarterback Carson Stevenson. You got a middle linebacker, running back in Evan Parrish, and then an offensive and defensive lineman in Alan Brown. And I think this game here, Bismarck, Henning, Rossville, Allen, or BHRA is what I'm going to call it. With Farmington, I feel that this is a good matchup for a round 1 game. I think it's an area where we could potentially see a very close game. And then on top of that, a game that we can see an 11 upset a 6.
Yeah.
And here's one of the reasons why. For the longest time, Coach Dodd at BHRA has been wing tee, wishbone style type, pound it down your throat type of offense. And they've had to change a couple things up due to the personnel that they've had. They've started to go spread offense since week 5. So it's a whole different animal than what we're used to seeing out of a Blue Devil team. And I don't know how much is truly on film out there to where people are going to see a lot of these wrinkles that they're going to throw into into the field. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah. We talked down on the southern half here. I think we did a little bit. Obviously, the Arthur Lovington, Atwood Hammond, are they a threat? Are they a legit number 1 seed? Can they make a run? Because that Quincy Notre Dame team has been tested. They're 4-5.
Yeah, that's
But
an
they've been
intriguing
tested.
matchup right there.
Honestly, if you want my personal
I
opinion,
do.
That's what we're here for, Kyle.
upset city, baby. We're going to see a 16 over 1.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Let's pull out
Like
the
March Madness,
Let's
yeah.
pull out the March miracles before we hit it. I
Interesting.
really,
Okay.
I really do. I think you take a look at QND's schedule, and I had to listen. I had to listen to some of their fans across different chats for quite a while talk about, man, woe is me, woe is us. Our schedule is terrible. It's brutal. And it really was. But here they have found themselves to get into the playoffs because they won the games that they were supposed to win. When we first started getting playoff projections and we were taking a look at what the 4 and 5 look would be, QND was one of those teams that was talked about from the get-go. And then as teams started to fall out, I remember talking to their coach. He messaged me and he goes, I hope we're still in it in a couple of weeks because obviously that's what matters.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we had that big hiccup there in week 8 where it's like, oh my gosh, we might not see any 4 and 5 teams.
Yeah.
Right.
And then this week it all went back
to the
so weird.
So because we saw a bunch of 4 and 5 teams that were, or 4 and 4 teams that were favored to be 5 and 4 get beat to open that window back up.
So I sent a direct message to Steve Susie before week 8 or right around week 8, and I said, hey, what would it take I was looking at the Western Big Six for Moline, Sterling, and potentially United Township. If they finish 4 and 5, do any of them have a shot at getting in at 4 and 5? I was just curious, because we had heard rumblings of, 5 and 4s were going to be the cutoff again this year. You weren't going to see a 4 and 5. And he said the only one that even had a prayer at it would have been Moline. Well, now you fast forward, and Sterling's beats in. Moline to be 4 and 5. They're both 4 and 5, and Sterling gets in.
Yep.
So it's just it was such an unpredictable the way this wrapped up. Like you said, it looked like they were not going to be 4 and 1 teams, and then it flipped on a dime in a week, and here we are. There's 7 of them total. So, and this is the one that we're covering down in the smaller schools. So
yeah, and I mean, I really feel that by taking a look at this bracket, the way it plays out. I wouldn't be surprised to see QND make a quarterfinal run in this.
That's interesting.
They could, for sure.
Yep.
So I'm really intrigued here. I think that they do have a team that can make some potential noise, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
One more team way down in the bottom half of the bracket, Breeze Mater Dei. It's a team I've been following a little bit. Last year I was higher on them, but this year when you look at their schedule, they lost in, when was it? I've got to find their name here. Breeze Mater Dei. There they are. They lost 17-14 to Breeze Central. So a much bigger rivalry game, much bigger school. I don't know if you saw it. It was actually I think it was shown later that a call was a field goal that was what happened. It was miscalled. The umpire, the field judge got it wrong in the moment.
So what happened is it was Central was going for a field goal on 3rd down.
Okay. Yes.
And they missed the field goal.
Yeah. And
because it was only 3rd down, the refs thought that they got another downed play.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is not correct.
Right.
Yes.
If you kick the ball past the line of scrimmage, it's an automatic forfeiture of down.
Yes, that's what I saw. So really, they lost that game, but maybe in theory they should have won it.
Or at least gone to overtime to have another opportunity.
You never know what's going to happen there.
But the field goal stood, and then Mater Dei found out afterwards, once they reached IHSA, that the wrong call was made.
That's brutal.
But they could not reverse the call.
Yeah, that's brutal.
That's tough.
So they lose that one. Their only other 2 losses are to Althoff and Mount Zion. Mount Zion's a 7-2 team who has enrollment over 700, so a much bigger school. So it's a team that at 6-3, I'm just kind of looking at down there on the bottom, like, could they make a little noise? Now, I was, like I said, high on them last year, and I don't know where they ended up, but they kind of let me down a little bit, I think. So, yeah.
All right, let's go back to 1A here.
All right.
So we're starting to discuss the Forrest and Lena Winslow matchup, and you brought it up earlier about Lena Winslow, Forreston having that 8-0 deficit at halftime.
Right.
And from what I heard, because obviously I was in Amboy last night, from what I heard, it goes to what you said. Forreston had a game plan, slow down the game.
Yep.
Control the ball, control the tempo, and they did that for a lot of the second quarter.
Right.
And then the drive eventually stalled. But that's exactly the type of game plan. I mean, you hear it all the time. Oh, Alina Winslow's going to route Forrest. And it's like, come on. It's only happened one time in reality where it was a running clock game. There's been a couple other times where it's been close to being running clocks. But only one truly has been a running clock game. And like you said, they have so much familiarity with each other.
Yeah.
They know the different nooks and crannies and nuances that each team's going to do. And the thing that really is great about Forreston is it doesn't matter what players they have. It's the coaching staff that they have get these guys to play at a level that you're like, how are they doing that? And like you said earlier, Greg, you talked about we've been beating them up on their schedule and their performance all season long. But I have also talked about it in my podcast as well on while it doesn't look pretty, like you said, it's going to help them in the long run because they're going to be prepared for that dogfight when we start to get the crappy weather, the cold weather, and things are really going to turn the tide there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just look at, they're battle tested in the Northwest Upstate Illini. Obviously, that, but they've been in some games where they've had to make some clutch plays.
Right,
had to
a lot
perform.
of close games, exactly.
Yeah, they've had to make the plays, and they have. So, man, can you imagine if Forreston tries to hold the ball and control the clock against Marquette, and Marquette tries to control the ball and hold the clock against Forreston? Neither team is going to.
The second is going to be over in like an hour and 15 minutes, isn't it, Greg?
I think so. I'm contractually obligated to say that, watch out. Maybe Marquette gets an upset.
Well, I'm pretty sure that game was at halftime by the time we got to the end of the first quarter.
It was.
And I know they picked up at the same time.
I thought maybe they started early.
Yeah.
It was flying last night.
Yeah.
So, another game, like let's go back to this Newman-Rova Williamsfield game.
Yeah.
To me on paper, that's a game that, in my opinion, I feel heavily favors Newman. But I've stated this to you before. I have not been on the Newman bandwagon all season, but I have heard, especially like you've already stated, that they have a very strong defense. It's the offensive side that gets issues.
Right.
Well, we know that as we get into these colder months, that defense can help prevail. We've seen it in years past with teams that 2013 Lena Winslow is a recent one where they relied heavily on defense to propel them to a state championship. We watched it with your Marquette Crusaders in 2015 as they stumbled and bumbled their way to a semifinal run.
Yeah.
Every week I'm like, Marquette, they're gone, and they just keep plugging away. And it's like, how in the heck are they doing that? Well, it was their defense. Their defense was keeping them in games and providing them the opportunities to strike when they needed to. And that's how I feel about Newman. Whereas Rova Williamsfield, sorry guys, where Rova Williamsfield, you've talked about it. The Rewerts kid is dynamite.
Riley Danner.
Danner. I'm sorry, Danner.
Yep,
is dynamite. We've heard about it. They were a young team last year when they went to Lena Winslow and got railroaded right out of Lena. And clearly they bounced back this year and have done even more better improvements over their game plan throughout the course of the season.
Yeah, I mean, this was a team that had some, expectations, and they've, for the most part, they've gotten there. They fell short against two good teams that are in this bracket. Right. But, they competed fairly well. They competed with Stark County, and then they hung around with Anawan Wethersfield for a while, and then Anawan Wethersfield grabbed that win. But on the thing I need to see is, can Newman score? Can Newman score enough points is the thing, So it could be a really low-scoring game, and like you said, that does favor Newman, but it takes one breakaway, right? One big play that this Robo Williams Field team can do, and you could win it that way.
Well, the other thing is, Newman, you've relied so much on getting turnovers all season long to help your offense. Once you get in the playoffs, things tighten up a little bit. Better teams don't turn the ball over as much, so that could catch up to Newman at some point in the playoffs. But again, like Carlson, when you got defense, you got a chance this time of year.
Well, I think
it's going to be a great matchup.
That's what I think. Is something's got to give, right? There's either going to be the turnovers, and that's going to cost Robo Williams Field, or there's not going to be those turnovers, and Robo Williams Field is going to do just enough defensively to slow down Newman and to keep them in check and not allow them to get any points, and then they only have to put up 14, 21, 28, and they could win that game. So I think when you look through this whole bracket, that's one of the most fascinating first-round matchups.
For sure.
Taking a look at some other games here, we've talked about Morrison and Fulton. I definitely think that whoever wins that game, and I've been asked, can we compete with Morrison from some Fulton friends of mine? And I don't know. You've seen both of them play.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that?
Well, so
Morrison has a lot of speed. We know that.
Yes, they do.
The one loss that they do have, albeit it's in the muck and in the mud and all that good stuff. And granted, you got to learn how to play in it, but it does slow a team like Morrison down.
Yeah.
And with that said, could a team like Fulton, granted, I think we're supposed to have pretty clear temperatures next weekend, so I don't think weather will be an issue. But at the same token, can they slow down the speed that Morrison has?
Well, and that's what I want to see. I want to see if Fulton can be that physical presence that can really knock around Morrison's front and really stop, really limit the gaps that are created, right? If the holes aren't there, I'm not saying it's impossible for those running backs because they'll find their own space. Yep. They'll be fast enough to get around them. But certainly that's where it starts, right? You limit, don't let them get the big blocks. Don't let them get the big push. That will go a long way. I think that's where Rockridge's defense really excelled against this Morrison team. So we'll see. That's an interesting. I think the other thing to look at is that this Morrison or this Fulton team is tough to read because I think they're getting better week by week.
Right.
I don't know that we can really, compared to some other teams, really look back at early season. I think they've gotten better. I think that Coach Lower is a coach and a program that they continue to improve, and I think that they're going to be ready to play in this game. They're the game plan is going to be there. I think I trust that coaching staff to have them ready. And man, it's a rivalry game. It's going to be a huge atmosphere.
I know, and don't get me wrong. It's all I've heard for the past week. I hope we get Morrison.
Yeah.
I hope we get Morrison.
Isn't that great? Yeah. And I think, on the flip side, for Morrison to be an 8-1 team and their only loss coming to Rock Ridge, opening round, you want to fire out of a cannon right away in the playoffs. That's a statement win right there.
Yeah.
You beat Fulton right before you jumped into their conference. That's huge. I think on the flip side, this is what Morrison probably wants too. Because you get him at home, you have all the speed, you have the talent that's been building for this. This is an opportunity. This is a great opportunity for both teams. It's fascinating.
Well, and then that little quadrant,
quad
right there. In my opinion, whoever wins that game will be the team that we see Lena Winslow facing in the quarters.
Yeah,
and if it were Fulton. Fulton and Lena Winslow
again. I know. Yeah. Yep.
And if Fulton could pull that upset off, call it an upset at 12 over 5. I don't know how big of an upset it is, but then Kiwani Wethersfield would have to come to Fulton in round 2.
Yeah. I remember telling Mitch in the beginning of the year that, the win over Rockridge, was it? No, it wasn't the win over Rockridge. It was the win. They had an early season win.
Who, Morrison?
Yeah.
Over Princeton.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was a big one.
That was huge.
But it was the week before that. And I said, I just don't have a good grasp on Morrison. They went 5-5 last year.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I know that they have speed, but speed's only good if you can get it through the holes. If you're not making holes, speed does nothing for you.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah.
And then when they beat Princeton, I remember telling Mitch, okay, I'm a believer now.
I think when you look, down the road, Morrison or Fulton, who matches up with potentially Anawan Wethersfield. I think it comes down to somebody's got to find a way to control Zeb Rashid. Stark
Right.
County did it early in the year, and even in controlling him, they still were a 2-point conversion away from losing that game. So,
Right.
Even in a game that I felt like Stark County really had an answer for him defensively, Anawan Wethersfield still almost came away with that win. So I think you got to find a way to control him. If you do, that puts you in a good spot to win the game. But you're right. I think that what we've seen in Morrison and certainly what we've seen in Fulton and the way they've been battle tested, that's a interesting matchup. I would probably favor Morrison or Fulton going down the road.
Yeah, I just that one just I don't know where to go. I don't know where to go. I'm hoping we get a Friday game somewhere
mixed in there,
or we got a 1:00 and a 5:00 game because
Yes.
the other one I'm really intrigued in is the Dupac Oregon game.
Yeah.
Yep.
And for me, I mean, it would be a great thing to be able to hit both of them up, but we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah.
Any other thing in 1A?
No, I mean, I think as far as that, top half of the bracket, that's everything that stands out to me. And then on the bottom, Camp Point Central or Althoff Catholic,
Which they would meet in the quarterfinals.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right.
So that's not even a semifinal matchup.
And the thing I have with that one, so we know that Althoff Catholic has a lot of speed. We've already been told that on film. You can see it, right? But CPC does too. And the only thing that CPC doesn't have is size. But they do play a physical level game. I mean, albeit they got routed pretty handily by Lena Winslow at state last year, but they made Lena Winslow earn every single yard that they got.
Yeah.
I mean, Lena Winslow could not bust off the big one that we're used to seeing them bust off because of how fast CPC was able to stay home and close the gaps and seal off the edges.
Yeah.
It's going to take that type of effort to knock off Althoff Catholic.
Right.
The only problem I see with CPC, because I watched them play Mendon Unity a couple weeks ago, and then I think I picked up a little bit of their game with Brown County on YouTube. Thanks to Jack Hall for that. But what I've seen is that they are explosive off the ball. They're just not big. But you don't always need to be big.
Right.
I mean, we watched Stockton win a state title with a line size of like 180 pounds, and you just got to be quick to your point, and you got to be able to hold it. And that's why I really like what Coach Dixon does, because he teaches those principles and he plays a physical level style of game. I just don't know if it's going to truly be enough, but I'm intrigued to see that matchup happen, because that will give us a good telltale sign of what's to come once we get to Bloomington on Friday after Thanksgiving. And I got my buddy Mitch Stormer sitting right next to me.
He's looking at going.
Don't back out, Mitch. You better be there. If you don't, I got a pass for you. I'll pay for you to get there.
There you go. And Coach Dixon never wears pants on the sidelines.
Ever.
Always shorts. Always shorts. So there you go. He told me that was one of his things, that he had a win at one point with shorts on, and that became his thing. He's always wearing shorts.
So the other team I was talking about before we head over to 8-man was the Calhoun team. I told you that we've talked about Calhoun. I was fortunate enough to make a trip down there last year in the first round. Got to go back to my old college stomping grounds in Jacksonville to pick up a Route Villa Grove game, and then I kind of snuck down south to Greenville because I've always wanted to see a game in Greenville at Florida Lee, and it was Calhoun and Greenfield Northwestern. And granted, the outcome didn't go in favor of Calhoun. Greenfield Northwestern put it to them, and then eventually met their demise to CPC in a game that they were in and potentially could have won and ended up losing. But Calhoun's definitely a team that is on their way. They're coming, and you got a lot of good young players there that are coming up. And I'm trying to remember. I know I got some players to talk about, but it's interesting to see the things that they do have with their draw. You take a look at who they have in round one. They have Hayworth. Yep. Hayworth is here at 7-2, But we watched Hayworth come up to Stockton earlier this year.
And-
Stockton go down there or whatever.
Yeah.
Hayworth came up to Stockton,
Yeah.
I believe, week 2.
And it was
And Stockton
It wasn't
put a clock
close.
on.
yeah,
It wasn't
that's what I thought.
close.
It wasn't yeah.
So
That's interesting. Yeah, so
Um,
you're saying you like Hardin Calhoun in that matchup.
I do. I do. I think
I
Calhoun
agree.
is going to play a very physical style of game here. And then that's going to set up a second round matchup with Camp Point Central. And when I was talking to my friend Logan Swan, who happens to be from the Calhoun area, he was talking about how he felt they did against Camp Point Central. And he felt like they had a couple key mistakes that had they not made, they would have been able to pull that game off. They even had the lead in that game in the second half as well, if I remember correctly, before CPC took it over. So if that can come back to a fruition in a second round matchup, we could be looking at a potential upset opportunity there. And I know that, the coaching staff that Calhoun has, there's a lot of guys down there that were on the 93 and 92 and 93 state championship teams that are now back a part of the program. They have family members that are coming up through the program.
Yeah.
And when you start to see that lineage take place, sometimes you see that history start to repeat itself too.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm very, very excited to see how that one plays out there.
8-man.
8-man.
All right.
Joe, what do you got there? What sticks out to you on the 8-man side?
Well, taking a look at the bracket in general, I think a lot of the first round games, you kind of got a good idea of who might win those. Maybe the one game that sticks out to me in that first round is that 8-9 matchup, 7-2 Ridgewood at the 8 seed South Fork.
Yeah.
That South Fork's a big team, physical team. Ridgewood, they played Pole, they played Amboy. And again, the winner of that one will have a shot against St. Thomas More. I mean, so
Yeah.
that's going to be a real interesting matchup there. So I'll be interested in that one for sure as far as first round matchups. I think the rest of the first round, you feel like seeds are probably going to hold the form. But yeah, that should be a fun one.
Quickly, how much has your opinion changed on St. Thomas More after today's result?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll put it out there.
Again, St. Thomas More, I think I've heard you say it, Kyle. You wish they were a little bit more physical.
Yeah.
They haven't played the Amboys, they haven't played the Milledgevilles. Does that mean you're shouldn't be a 9-0 team? No, that doesn't mean that. They got a great player in Peace Bumba. They got a couple really good linemen. They lost to Amboy in the semis last year, pretty handily. Amboy took care of business in that game.
And going back to Peace Boomba, I mean, we're talking about a kid that's getting D1 looks coming out of 8-man.
Exactly.
Legit. Yeah.
He's legit.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you can just see it. I mean, he's big, he's tall, he's strong.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't been able to see them play. Unfortunately, I had to be in Indianapolis when they were playing South Beloit right down the road.
Yeah.
And I wanted to go to that game just so I could take a look because I've been talking to Coach Watson for like the last 2 years now. And I wanted to see Peace play because I remember when Orangeville had to go down there in 21 in their first year.
Right.
They had to play his brother, Adonai Boomba.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
And, and it's funny because I saw a little bit of tidbit from Peace on who his favorite player or athlete is growing up. And he listed his brother as his favorite player.
That's
so I thought it was very cool. And at the same time, I mean, watching some of the runs I've seen on the film that Edgy Tim provided.
Oh, yeah.
He had some big physical runs in that game.
Yeah.
He does. And you're looking, if Ridgewood can win that first round game at South Fork, you're looking at St. Thomas More going to the Bowl in Cambridge for a second round matchup. That would be a fun one. That would be a great atmosphere.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people are kind of thinking they're probably the team representing the top half of that bracket in Monmouth for the state championship will come out of that Ridgewood St. Thomas winner. And no disrespect to anybody else in the top half of that bracket, but I think a lot of people are probably trending that way if you had to pick who's coming out of the top half of that bracket. River Ridge at the 12 seed there, making the 5-hour trip down to Martinsville.
Oh,
that's a 5-hour trip. I just Googled it here a little bit ago. 5 hours and 2 minutes, Hanover to Martinsville.
Oh, man. That's brutal.
That's probably going to be a Saturday game.
Yeah.
They're going to be playing that one on a Friday.
Coach Nicholas might want to wrap up the coaches and get down there a day early and settle in for the night.
If you're a team like River Ridge, though, you would probably take that instead of going to Amboy or Milledgeville or Polo.
I think
getting away from those three,
exactly.
You'll get on that bus and travel those 5 hours and take your chances.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
well, and not just that, but let's look at it in another aspect. I played in the 1 through 32 era, and obviously it was only around for like 5 or 6 seasons, and then it got canned. And you got a lot of advocates that love the regional games because they get to stay close to home and see all these great playoff games, and in their opinion, it drives up numbers to people coming to games. And I remember being in Milledgeville back in 1998 when Pleasant Hill had to come all the way up here. That place was packed.
Yes, it was.
And then Carthage had to be there the very next week, and I was there again, and it was even more packed.
Right.
And then the next year, I was in Dakota, and I watched Verdon come all the way up here, and Carthage come all the way up here. But on top of that, you still had all the local teams and communities flocking in. I mean, you can park on campus at Dakota.
Wow.
The grass was filled, the parking lot was filled, the elementary was filled. You had to go all the way down past the cemetery out onto Dakota Road to find a parking spot. And I mean, we've seen those games at Lena Winslow in the past. We've seen it in Milledgeville. We've seen it in Galena. But what I'm getting at is it's the experience. Nothing beats that experience. And unfortunately, I really feel that the political people that drive how we do things and only focus on, well, you can't put a kid on a bus for 7 hours. Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
That's the spirit of playoff football in the state of Illinois.
Yeah.
Go tell the state of Texas that they can't put a kid on a bus for 7 hours when they got to travel 4 hours for a damn conference game.
Right. Yeah.
You can't tell me that you can't do it.
Right.
Especially when that 7-hour trip, if it happens, is far and few between. I mean, when we break out the brackets 1 through 32, even just for fun, more times than not, the average distance isn't that much greater than the 1 through 16.
No,
and that's what makes 8-man. I love how they do the 8-man. I get it's only 16 teams.
Yeah.
But, you wouldn't want to see two quadrants or either. You love the 1 through 16 setup for the 8-man.
Absolutely. Yeah. You don't got to convince me on going to 1 through 32 or kids getting in a bus and going somewhere. I think that's part of. I think the kids want the experience. Like
that's some of your best memories.
It is.
Bus rides.
It is.
And I mean, I think back in the day, like when the technology wasn't as rampant, so you were these other places were a little foreign to you. You didn't know exactly like what how good they were, who they played. You knew some of it through scouting and film stuff. But now I think fast forward, the world is so much more connected because of technology. You see film and you see huddle video, you see all the internet, social media type stuff that I think kids want to go to these places. I think they want to get out and see what they've seen on film and huddle and all that.
Not just that, but it's a great state geography lesson.
Well,
Seriously, so many people are like, how do you know where that town is? Well, I've been there.
Yes.
Or I've had to see another town that's played that team, or I've been to that town and whatnot because of the different travels. I mean, I came back from college when we had to drive down to Alexis to play Alexis before the merger. And, that was a fun road trip. I wasn't even in school for it.
Yeah.
I just went to watch it. But I went with a bunch of buddies, and we had a hell of a time. It was great.
Yeah, moving down the bottom of that 2A bracket real quick. Obviously, you got the number 1 team in the state all season, the Amboy Clippers, sitting there at the 2 seed, 9-0. Looking at a second-round matchup with probably Flanagan. A very favorable draw there for Amboy. And then moving down to the bottom of the bracket, you're looking at a possible Milledgeville Polo second-round matchup.
Yep.
That's kind of a Morrison-Fulton type deal right there, So
Yeah.
As close as those two teams are, 11 miles apart, and all the times both those teams made the playoffs in 11-man, they've never met in the playoffs.
Wow.
Milledgeville and Polo. That would be a fun one at Floyd Dobb Field if Milledgeville and Polo take care of business in that first round. And another NUIC team, Orangeville, the 14 seed, they have to go to Milledgeville. So hopefully they can put up a little bit of better fight than they did the first time there. But
don't count on it.
I like Polo's chances against a West Prairie team that's West Prairie's got a few good wins, but they've struggled to score this year. I like Polo in that matchup. So you're looking at possible second-round matchups in 8-man of Milledgeville versus Polo and, St. Thomas More versus Ridgewood. So, and then possibly Amboy taking on that Polo Milledgeville winner in the semis.
Well, I'll put you on the spot then. If we fast forward, if we say we get Milledgeville and Polo in that second round, what's Polo got to do to change the narrative this time? They lost the first goal.
Yeah. Polo got down early in that game and it just kind of steamrolled. Like they just couldn't get any traction going, I don't think anyone expects it to be a 36-point game again if those two teams meet up again. I think Polo's going to be able to put up some more points on Milledgeville this time. Is Polo going to be able to find a way to stop that Milledgeville offense? Yeah. I'm confident they can put up more points this time, but you still got to find a way to stop that. Really, Amboy's the only team that's come close to stopping Milledgeville. They held them to 20. Milledgeville's just put up 50, 60, 70 points on everybody else.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've noticed about Milledgeville, and it might I don't know if it's the player, the coach, and it's one of those things where I've seen Milledgeville gets in desperation mode when they get behind, and then all of a sudden they're just throwing stuff.
Get away from what they
get
should
away
be
from
doing.
their principles, right?
They do. Yes, they do.
And to me, that's a demise. When you're behind, you cannot get away from what you're doing. If you're having success with it, I get it. If you got under 4 minutes to go, the urgency level has to pick up. But if you're behind in the third quarter, I mean, how many times have we seen teams come back down 2 touchdowns in the third quarter? I mean, we just watched it the other night with Stockton and Galena.
Right.
I mean, hell, I'm driving home from Amboy thinking Stockton's got that game on lockdown, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on here?
Right, for sure.
So
no, the bottom
gotta
half.
Stick to your plan.
Yeah, Milledgeville Polo, that winner taking on Amboy in the semis. That's some good small town high school football right there.
I love it, man.
I mean, that's
that's what makes the 8-man bracket so great in our part of the state is that these 8-man programs in our area have been so good that they are setting up those matchups every year. And, I love it.
Well, it's like Josh Dillon asked me last night when I was on his halftime show on the Amboy channel. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah. I knew I was going to see you tonight, Kyle. I was going to see you for 4 hours tonight.
No, I'm just kidding. I like talking to Josh though, but he was sitting there and he was asking me similar questions to what he'd asked me when I talked to him last year about 8-man football. And we still have a lot of naysayers out there on the 8-man game that, well, it's not real football. And it's like, yes, it is real football. You still have to line up against another person.
Yep.
You still have to hit that person. You still have to make a tackle. You still have to make a play. One of the things that I really enjoy about the game is you got to do it at a much faster pace because you don't have as much time to sit back and wait.
Right. Correct.
And then attack. You have to read and assess a lot faster in order to make a play. And everybody's like, oh, it's just arena football. It's like, I don't think people understand the amount of time you actually lose having less people on the field and what looks like an abundance of more space to roam and run.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking coaches making game plans, especially when we get to the playoffs. I mean, they're watching as much film as the 11-man coaches are because it's there's so many different things these teams can do with the 8 guys in the field. But
it's like I talked to Jay Doyle. I mean, bad football is bad football. I don't care if it's 11-man or 8-man.
Yeah.
Do you really want to go watch two shitty 11-man teams play just as much as you want to watch two shitty 8-man teams play? No, you don't.
Right. And yeah, you'll hear people, well, there's, the bottom half of 8-man is not very good. Well, the bottom half 11-man.
No.
You see blowouts all the time in 11-man.
I'm sorry.
All the time.
You get down to seeds 11 and lower, in my opinion, in most classes,
yeah,
they're not good.
Right.
I mean,
it's just the way it is.
There's some that are. There's
Right.
some that are because they've been beat up through like a QND at 16 seed. That's probably going to be a very good team.
Right.
And there's a few that trickle in there. We've seen it and we know it because we know what kind of competition that they're playing. But in the general scheme of things, yeah, you get those lower seeds. Okay, I ran my mouth on another page earlier this year about Carrollton when they were 4-0, and somebody said, "Oh well, they're gonna be 5-0 and they're gonna be the worst 5-0 team in the state." And I said, "You're absolutely right." I said, "Watch Carrollton go 5-4." Sure enough, here we are. They're 5-4.
Well, and I think another way to look at this, guys, you look at that 8-man bracket. If we're being honest with ourselves, there's 4 or 5 teams that you could make a case for have a chance to win the state title. Go to the 1A bracket.
Exactly.
Yeah, I understand everyone's picking Lean and W all tough Catholic, but is there many more than 4 or 5 teams that you think have a legit shot to win the title?
Yeah.
Right. I'm just saying.
Almost every bracket's the same like that.
You can say that about 1A, 2A, 3A.
Yep.
And 8-man's the same way.
You got 4 to 5 teams that you're really.
You're like, okay, this team has a legit shot to win 4 or 5 games in a row and win the championship.
And the other 28 to 29, you're just like, well, maybe.
Let's see if we can just win this next one and see what happens.
Yeah.
But anyway, 8-man game is fun. What people fail to realize, because that's another thing that we hear about, and I know you hear about it, is, well, Amboy and Polo have 40 players on the sidelines. They need to go back to 11-man. People forget what the spirit of 8-man football is about. It was about fledgling programs, and programs that were going to see ultimate failure and demise in their own said program due to futility of players not coming back out. Being able to continue to play under their name and help build.
It's about keeping Millersville, keeping Polo, keeping Amboy.
But it's helping to build the game back up because now you're starting to see success. You're starting to get more kids back out. And oh my gosh, would you believe that Illinois has had a 6% increase in players playing football this year?
Look no further than the Ridgewood program. They were 11-man. They made the playoffs in 19. Was it 19? They lost to Morrison, I believe. And then their last year in 11-man, they went 0-9. And they had struggled before that as well. They had that 1 year where they made the playoffs at 11-man before they were done. And then this move to 8-man has been great for them. Yeah. Because they're relevant. They're competing with schools that are their size. And it brings that excitement back to the program and to the community, and I think it's a good move for teams that
Amboy was down to their last year 11-man. I think they were down to 23 players, freshman through senior. You can't play 11-man with that. You just can't do it.
No,
not if you really want to compete.
Yeah, right. And it's a changing landscape. These towns are getting smaller. I think sometimes people get so locked into, well, how is Amboy playing 8-man? They used to do this. And it's like, well, a lot of teams used to do things and enrollments have changed and community sizes have changed. And you have to kind of pay attention to that. And I think some people get removed from it. They don't realize it. So anyway, I love 8-man. You don't have to talk me into it.
I'll be honest. I was one of those pundits against it when it first came into inception.
Yeah.
And then I went to my first game was River Ridge Polo in 2019 in the semifinals.
Yeah.
And after that, I watched on YouTube, standing right over there, the Polo MCP state championship game. And then then of course, once COVID got out of the way, and we saw the fallout and increase in 8-man in 2021.
Yeah.
Then I started picking up more games, and it was definitely a lot more fun.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations where once you go to a game and watch one of between two at least halfway decent programs, if you want to knock it after that, that's fine. But don't knock 8-man until you go watch a game in person
against good competition.
Right,
like,
exactly.
Get some good schools.
Right.
I mean, I tell people all the time, go watch that Polo Orangeville State Championship game. That game was unbelievable. And if you want to see more of an offensive defensive battle, watch last year's West Central Amboy game.
Right. Exactly.
Or go back and watch the West Central Polo game. Even.
Right.
Great games hell, Kyle Leach's call on that West Central Polo game still echoes in my ears.
Love it. Because he's great. Because he's good. Yeah.
I mean, I know who he was polling for in that game.
I'm sure you do.
But he didn't make it sound that way,
Yeah.
And I mean, man, that call was awesome. But the game was what made that call available to us.
Yep.
And anyway, all right, we'll start 8-man, go back up to 3A.
Okay.
Let's pick who we see making their way to the state championship game and who we feel is going to be the winners. And people listening, if you guys out there still have some remaining questions, go ahead and throw them out there, and we'll continue to answer those questions as they keep rolling in, as well as we start to get into the closing minutes here. All right, what do you got? Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Go ahead.
All right, so for 8-man, I've been saying it since last year ended. Amboy is going to be the #1 team coming into this year. I've seen him play a couple times in person, watched him a couple times on film this year. I've seen nothing that has changed my mind. I think the winner of that Polo Milledgeville game is going to give them all they can handle. I mean, that is shaping up to be a classic, no matter who that is. But I'm going to pick Amboy over Ridgewood in the 8-man state championship, the 2 seed over the 9 seed.
Man, you stole my thunder.
I know.
Did I?
Yeah.
No disrespect to St. Thomas More. I saw St. Thomas More in person, watched them on film a few times, but Peace Bumba is the real deal. I just feel like Ridgewood is a more balanced team than Champaign St. Thomas More. So I'm going to go Amboy over Ridgewood in Monmouth on that Friday night before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you look at the we'll just call it the south or the bottom half of that bracket. I feel that there's only 2 teams that can truly come out of there,
right,
to get to Monmouth, and that's Amboy and Milledgeville.
Okay.
And I'm definitely looking forward to the potential. I hope it, for Milledgeville's sake especially, because they've been so good since they've been an 8-man, but they've just continued to run into quarterfinal loss after quarterfinal loss.
Yeah, they haven't got out of quarterfinals the first 2 years.
So
they really weren't supposed to last year.
No, last year they weren't supposed to.
The year before they went down to Amboy. That was an upset.
That was an upset, yeah. Which got the ball rolling for Amboy at the same time.
Kind of started that narrative.
It kind of jump started that whole program for them, the 8-man thing.
And so, I mean, I love what Coach Roble does. I really like what Coach Payne is doing at Amboy too. I'm hoping that those two meet up in the semifinals. For the sake of the game, if Polo were to make it there and get an upset over Milledgeville, I wouldn't be disappointed in that, obviously, either. But I just and I don't want to leave out FCW, but I just don't think that they're going to make it past the quarterfinals with Amboy.
No.
And I do like, provided Amboy continues to play the way they're doing, and you said you brought it up with Brennan Blaine being the leader, the admiral. He plays every bit the part too.
Right.
I mean, he definitely keeps these guys going. I mean, even last night, the one missing piece from last year was Tucker Lindenmeyer, and where was he? Down on the sidelines, cheering on those guys.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great.
So, I mean, he's in street clothes cheering on his boys, and that's important. And so, yeah, Amboy's my pick to get to Monmouth. On the upper side, that's tough. I MCP and Martinsville is going to be a great matchup. I can see happening.
Right.
Yeah, but I've told you all year long I've been on Ridgewood all
Yeah.
year long.
Yeah.
So like you just
Yep.
stated, I got Ridgewood going to state. I like the way that they play. I know that they can match up with the physical teams. And that's the one question mark I have on St. Thomas More is the physicality. I know that they could do it. And they like I said, they look the part.
Mm-hmm.
But we have not seen it. We have not seen the score separations that you would expect to see out of a team that truly wants to compete for a state title. And earlier tonight, I had one guy tell me, I think I told you guys this before we actually went live. He goes, there's no way that STM's better than number 5. Now, I don't know about that per se because I think.
Oh, they're a top 5 team.
Yeah.
I mean,
He's
Bumble alone puts you in the top 5.
Yeah.
And I agree.
Yeah.
I agree 100% because me personally, I got them at number 3. I think they're the third best.
I would. Yeah.
But I think Ridgewood can knock them off. And that's where my pick to get to state.
And the other thing, I talked about this earlier, if it would be that Amboy-Ridgewood matchup, Ridgewood played Amboy as tough as anybody in the regular season.
Yeah.
I mean, so that would be a very fun matchup if that does happen.
I agree with Ridgewood for all the reasons you stated. I think that I think that they've played some really good teams really close. And like we talked about a long time ago when we started, I like what Coach Elder's doing there. He's got the experience. He's got the track record. I think he's got the horses this year to go. I think he's in that state championship game. I think Milledgeville pulls an upset, and I think they're playing for a state title. I think Milledgeville wins the state championship.
Wow.
Yep. I think that there's gonna be an upset there. It's gonna be a great game, maybe an all-time classic against Amboy. But let's go.
Yeah.
Let's see if Milledgeville can pull it off. I just made a bunch of enemies in one part of our listening area. But
if Milledgeville does it, you got to come back to Milledgeville when they get home from Monmouth to watch them ring the bell.
All right, absolutely. No, I like what Coach Roble does there, and I think that they've been battle tested this year. They came up short in the regular season, but it's a whole new ball game. Let's see if they can, create the buzz around 8-man and get the upset of the season.
So you think Milledgeville's good enough to beat Polo and beat Amboy just to get to state and then beat Ridgewood?
I'm going to say it.
All right.
I'm going to go with it.
They got the talent to do it.
That's
3 tough teams.
I know.
But you got to pick somebody. I mean,
Yep. I like it.
So my pick was Amboy to win.
Yeah.
I think the Clippers set sail and bring home that first state title since 1984.
And I will say, I think there's a chance this could be the first of 2 or 3 or 4 in the next 5 years. They are set up.
Wow. Okay.
JV team is great.
Okay.
Sounds like their junior high is looking good. This could be the start of something really big, Amboy.
Okay.
So be interesting.
For sure. I love it. I can't wait to watch it. I'm gonna just throw something out there. We'll see what happens here. So.
Oh, I love it. Getting photos of Lena Winslow in their playoff hair already.
That's right.
I love it. See, that's what I mean. The spirit of the game, it just takes you to places you never thought you'd be.
That Class 1A bracket, is that where we're headed here?
Yep, well, let's go 1A. So I just got a little nugget, as you would say.
Yeah.
And it was brought to us by our great friend, Greg Pruis.
Yes. Ooh.
So, Morrison and Fulton
in
the first round are meeting for the 87th time.
Awesome.
And Morrison leads the series 56-30. And since the wooden shoe was initiated, Morrison leads that series 28-16.
And we heard from athletic director in Fulton, Parsons.
Jeff Parsons.
There you go.
Principal now.
Yep, that's right. Yes, I don't want to shortchange his
title. He is still at AD too.
Yes. He says officially a playoff game would not be played. The shoe would not be on the line.
Correct.
So stay in Fulton until next year when they reestablish the regular season rivalry. We were wondering about that, and we heard some confirmation. So there you go. But yes. All right. So who's making picks here?
All right, I'll start in Class 1A. I mean, not really going out on a limb here. I thought maybe I'd try to, but you just can't bring yourself to do it.
Yep.
I'm going to say Lena Winslow versus Bellevue Althoff Catholic in the 1A state championship game. I'm going to say it. I'm picking Bellevue Althoff Catholic over Lena Winslow.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah.
I do.
It's tough to say. Like,
it is.
So.
I remember the last time I picked against Lena Winslow. It was Aurora Christian.
Whoa. How'd that work out?
It did not work out for me. I'm pretty sure Parker McGee threw me some blow kisses as they were kicking their tail.
Oh, man.
And that was the last time I picked against Lena
All
Winslow.
right, so what are you doing this year, Kyle? What are you thinking?
I agree. I mean, let's be honest. It's going to take either an injury, overconfidence, or some freak tragedy that happened to keep either one of these teams away from Bloomington.
I agree.
And let's hope that none of those three items actually happen, unless it's overconfidence and you just deserve to get your ass kicked.
Okay. Yep.
But with that said, I like Lena Winslow. I think they're going to provide the physical game that I don't feel Althoff Catholic has seen yet. And I think that they can mitigate some of that speed that Althoff Catholic has, because there's not a team that I've seen in Class 1A that can play to shut down the edges and play gap responsibility and assignment football the way Lena Winslow does on a year in, year out basis. Lena Winslow gets number 4.
So
In a row.
4 in a row, what, 7 since
Number
2010 if they win it,
Number
right?
7.
So what you described happening with Lena Winslow doing to Althoff Catholic, I'm going to take it a few rounds before that. I say Camp Point Central is going to slow it down. Brad Dixon is going to have a game plan, and they're going to slow down Althoff just enough. It's going to be a good game. I think Camp Point Central is going to pull off that win. It's going to be a rematch between Lena Winslow and Camp Point Central. Lena Winslow is going to be your state champion again.
You know what?
I think Brad Dixon's going to make another run here.
You know what that reminds me of? 1998 Carthage Newman. Carthage only threw the ball 29 times all season long.
Okay.
Yep.
The 29th pass was to win the state championship.
Oh, there you go.
And
There
Jim
you go.
Unruh had a big run in front of him after that. And I tell you what.
Yeah.
Nick Moore could be that guy.
Nick
Moore could be that guy where they try to run a belly to the right, and all of a sudden you got a
somebody
back
wide
line.
open.
Yep.
All right. I love it. I think there's something there. I'm gonna trust Coach Dixon to make it happen. So
I love it. All right, 2A. What we got in 2A?
2A.
You gotta think about this one a little bit more.
Yeah,
I do
that's-
anyway.
Yeah.
The North is
I mean,
loaded. Man. I don't know.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is a lot of good teams in here.
All right. I'll go first on this one.
Okay.
I'll take my stab in the dark here.
Mm-hmm.
Who do I like in that South?
yeah, that's tough. You want to pick Quincy Notre Dame?
You're
don't you?
damn right I do. I do.
Oh, man.
Last team into the playoffs
The Cinderella story. Here we go.
gets to Bloomington. Yeah, I am.
You're gonna say it?
I am.
All
I'm
right.
taking Quincy
All
Notre
right.
Dame.
Wow.
I am going to take QND to state.
Wow. All right.
I am.
All right.
I am jumping on the Raider bandwagon.
They've been battle tested for
So,
sure.
and they will be playing who, Kyle? Who are you thinking out of the North?
All right, out of the North. And this is where it really gets tough, and you gotta look at the pairings. And
You really could see several teams making the state championship game out of that North bracket.
I could, but the play that I like the most, I really like Maroa Forsyth. I really do. And to be quite honest, they're my favorite to get back to Bloomington. I just feel that they're so explosive in what they do. But I'm going to pull a string on you guys.
Okay.
This is going to be an all-Catholic state championship game.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I think it's Bloomington
Bloomington
Central
Central,
Catholic against Quincy Notre Dame in this one. And
Okay.
when it gets to that point, BCC brings home the state title to the Illini Prairie.
Yeah, I can see that.
That's
I
my
can see
pick.
that.
Interesting. Okay.
For all the reasons you stated, I'm going Maroa Forsyth. I think they're, in my opinion, they're close to, if not the best team talent-wise. I think you could debate what Bloomington Central Catholic brings to the table, but when you also look at their resume, I think they've played several games close against really good competition, and they've come away with wins. And I like that they've been battle-tested. They've been in some tight spots. And it's Maroa Forsyth, right? They know what it's like to be in these situations. And again, this year they were tested. They came away with the test in the regular season. I'm going to say they're playing at Hancock Stadium. And I'm going to say Breeze Mater Dei. We talked about them earlier.
Okay.
I just think when you look at this bracket and you kind of look at what they've faced this year, it's a deceiving 6-3. I think they could be a sleeper down in the bottom there. I think they make it to Hancock Stadium. I think Maroa Forsyth is your state champion.
I like that pick. I had a hard time going against them, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to go coming out of the north. I'll go Maroa Forsyth as well. Again, I'm not maybe as knowledgeable on 2As, the 8-man, the 1A, and the 3A here, but I'm going to go a little bit of they're not really a sleeper. The 2 seed Shelbyville coming out of the south.
But I still think that's it.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Maroa Forsyth over Shelbyville in the 2A state championship game.
Okay. Yeah, that's another team I looked at as I was kind of scanning the bracket.
I think if that game happens, I'm gonna open my mouth. I think if that game happens, we're gonna see a running clock.
Okay. Gun open mouth. You already did.
Yeah.
So we already started that ball rolling. So
I like the conversation.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, one left.
All right, I'll start. Out of the north, like a lot of people, I'm probably picking Byron to meet up with Lombard Montini in the semifinals. I'm going to pick Byron to get to state. And I don't know, I've kind of been listening to Kyle yesterday and today. He's kind of sold me on Roxana for whatever reason. So I'm going to take Byron over Roxana.
Go Shells!
Byron over Roxana in the 3A state championship is my pick.
I'm not even going to break it down. That's my pick, too.
I didn't mean to steal your thunder,
That's
Kyle.
all right. I like it.
You talked me into Roxana.
I love it. That's
I'm
my pick.
sticking with my gut here. Way back early in the season, I started looking at Stanford Olympia, and I just was seeing what their resume looked like and the
They're
wins
tough.
they've been getting.
They're tough.
They had a couple good statement wins last year, and I felt like they built on that. So I think this is their year. I think Stanford Olympia is going to make their way to the state championship game. I think they're going to run into Byron. I think Byron's going to win it again. I hope that's right, because I would rather see Byron there than Montini, if I'm being totally honest, which I think everybody would agree with, or at least most
Didn't you
listening
go to a
does.
Catholic school?
I did, but I'm a small town guy. You guys know that.
Yeah. I had to kid you.
Yeah.
I agree.
I could see Byron having a running clock against everyone but Lombard Montini.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, they're that good.
Some guy already said that on our.
Oh, did they? I didn't even see that.
Oh, that's all right. He said that.
Well, I'll agree with that gentleman then.
he said that Byron 30 points to field, so
Yep.
Yeah.
can't argue there by any stretch.
All right.
Well, what do you guys think?
I'm with you on. I don't know where I'm going to go or what I'm going to be covering here, because there's a lot of great games.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see the game time to see how many games, especially that first round, how many games can you attend?
Yeah.
Can there be a Friday night game, and then can you have a 1:00 Saturday and like a 5:00 Saturday?
I'm hoping so.
Head coach Jade Nord from Stark County all but confirmed this afternoon, if it's them versus Princeville, which it is, that would be a Friday night game. At
Oh
Stark
yeah,
County.
Stark County, they're a big fan of that opening
play on
Friday night.
and I
game
love it.
for
I've been to that
Yep.
game several times, and I love it.
Actually, and I got one too. Just hit me. Coach Reed said that South Beloit and FCW will be playing in Flanagan on Friday night.
Okay.
At 7 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Were there many 8-man games that have been on Friday nights over the years?
No.
No, they
Not
usually
too many.
stick to
I
the
don't
Saturday.
remember any of them.
Polo hosted Kirkland last year.
Oh,
on Friday night,
yep.
And I think West Central played.
That
they
sounds right.
They played their first
First
round on
year.
Friday night.
That
I
sounds
can't remember
right.
who they played the first
Yeah.
round.
Yeah,
The other thing with that is sometimes for that it comes down to officials.
it does.
You
Yeah.
know, if like the 8-man would decide, hey, maybe we should play on Friday night, we get maybe a little bit better pick of officials. All the officials are taking up Saturday
That's
afternoon.
true. Yeah.
So I think now granted you got some of these trips that are 2-3 hours, it's probably going to be Saturday, but
Yep.
at 8-man you're looking at, hey, if we play Friday night, we can go get these officials.
Right.
This group of officials. So something else to think about when you're planning out games.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that gives you a look at how we broke down the brackets. Hopefully, we dove into enough teams. We haven't seen a whole lot of questions coming in that talk about other teams that you wanted us to dive into. And the questions that we did come in, I hope we touched on those teams for you. I feel that we did. We did a lot.
We talked about a lot of teams.
And
Yep.
Hopefully you enjoyed the product and the show. We're definitely excited to get the playoffs going on here. You got your podcast coming up here on
We're ready to rock and roll. We'll record Monday night. It'll come out on Tuesday. So,
and then you guys are doing your podcast tomorrow.
8-man podcast, the Spotlight IFA. That'll be out tomorrow afternoon sometime.
Awesome.
Great.
We'll break down the whole 8-man bracket.
Awesome.
So they got their podcast coming out early in the week. Mine comes out on Thursday where I keep it. And we hope you enjoyed the show. Get out to the games, root for your teams. As always, root for the NUIC.